Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Happy Thursday, everybody. Got another awesome day of content coming your way. As you guys can tell by the title of the show, we're diving into Notre Dame's defense in a very similar fashion to how we dove into Notre Dame's 2026 offense yesterday. We're going to talk about the defensive side of the ball, expectations, keys to a successful season, what comes back, what they lost. But before we do that, Brian, we were getting ready for the show and we were prepping. And then something came across your desk that got us both pretty fired up by our friends over at On3, my man.
Yeah, there's been a couple things that have gotten me fired up lately. Like there's some preseason way too early rankings that have Notre Dame 9th, 7th, PFF's rankings is pure trash. And then we came across Ryan texted me this morning and he was like, dude, On3 has a top 100 that doesn't have Leonard Moore in it. And I was like, that's insane. So I went and looked at it, and it was an oversight on their part. They added Leonard Moore back in at number 6, which I would still argue is too low. It didn't make any sense because they had him ranked high last year, and he was a unanimous All-American. So stupid to not have him in there. So, okay, I'll grant that it was an oversight. Then I started to look at the rest of the ranking, and I'm like, this is pure garbage. And it's not just Notre Dame players. There's other things we're going to point to as well that are just like pure garbage. And we're going to have some fun with that, Trev. But, we're like, dude, we got to talk about this. We got to dive into this because the disrespect for Notre Dame is so strong. And look, this is what this really boils down to for me. It's what this boils down to is this is nothing more than On3 basically going with their validation for where they had guys ranked in high school in a lot of ways. And we're going to dive into to some of this here, Trev, because it's an absurd ranking, and there absolutely is a clear, I don't want to say bias, because I don't know if it's intentional. Like when I say bias towards Notre Dame, that's more of an intentional thing. This is more, to me, a little bit of an, I just think, silliness. But some of the rankings here, so let's just kind of go over it, Trev. Number 1, they have Leonard Moore as the number 6 player in the country, behind Jeremiah Smith, Dante Moore, Dylan Stewart, Malachi Toney, Colin Simmons, and then Leonard Moore 6. We could nitpick. I would have Leonard Moore above Dante Moore. I would have him ahead of. He's more proven than Colin Simmons or Dylan Stewart. But that's nitpicking. He's the number 6 player in the country. There's clearly a level of respect there. And then they have Anthony Knapp at 18. Now, I would argue that's also some confirmation bias because the thing they brag about is the former On3 outlier 4-star. I'm like, look, you want to put Anthony Knapp in the top 100? I'm fine with that because I've said I think he's got a chance to be an All-American next year. I don't really have a beef with that, although I would say I probably wouldn't have him that high if we're being honest. But I understand why some people do. That's where it starts to get really stupid. And they have C.J. Carr, number 86 on this list. They have Boubacar Traore at number 66. And then they have Kingston Viliama-Asa, who A, doesn't start for Notre Dame, B, is going to miss at least the first chunk of the year at number 89. No Drake Bowen, no Tay Johnson, no Adon Schuler, no Gerby Lambert. Like, this is an absolute garbage list. Garbage list. And we're going to start with CJ, but all this is, and that's where it became obvious, not having Drake on there, not having Tay Johnson on there, not having Adon on there, not having CJ on there. None of those guys were highly considered coming out of high school. They didn't have a single one of those guys ranked in the top 200. And I would argue Boubacar's too low when you look at some of the guys they have ahead of him. For example, they have Chaz Coleman from Tennessee at number 53. Now, coming out of high school, Chaz Coleman was a much more highly ranked player than Boubacar Traore when he signed with Penn State. He was a true freshman this past year. They had him as the number 137 overall player in the country, and then they had him as the number 5 portal player in the country this year. Number 6, which is absurd. Boubacar, they barely had in the top 300. This kid had 3 tackles for loss and 1 sack last year. They have Bear Alexander in the top 25. Seriously. And Boubacar is 66th. Like the level of BS in this ranking is absolutely like just absurd. And there's some other ones that aren't even just about Notre Dame. These are the names of the quarterbacks that they have above Trinidad Chambliss, Dante Moore, Sam Levitt, which is nuts. You have Julian Sayin, Arch Manning, Lenore Sellers, Jaden Maeva is at 27. You have Darian Mensah at number 40. And then you have Trinidad Chambliss at 62. Like, so again, it's not just Notre Dame players, but then after Trinidad Chambliss, they have Byron Brown ahead of CJ Carr, Drew Mestamaker ahead of CJ Carr, Josh Hoover ahead of CJ Carr, and Jaron Kawasagapotulele from Cal, who they had as a top 100 player coming out of high school. And CJ Carr is 12th. Now, okay, yeah, guys, you're Notre Dame fans. Of course you guys think CJ Carr is that good. You know, you're Notre Dame fans. You guys are biased, all that other kind of stuff. You know, look, CJ Carr this past year finished 47th in the country in passing yards. Like, okay, cool. It's a little bit slanted because he would have been right where Arch Manning was if he didn't only throw for 49 yards in a 70-7 blowout of Syracuse. Number one. Number two. All right, cool. Where'd CJ Carr rank in yards per attempt this year? He's tied for second with a Heisman Trophy runner-up. The only quarterback ahead of him was Drew Mestamaker, who played at the G5 level. I want to remind you, played at the G5 level. I'd like to point out that last year CJ Carr played, 2 games against G5 teams, and let's look at and they were 2 good G5 teams, by the way, Trev. He going to play against Boise State and he played against Navy, and in those 2 games he averaged 10.4 yards per pass attempt in his 2 games against G5 teams. Just want to point that out real quick. Last year, CJ Carr was ahead of everyone else, including the Heisman Trophy winner, Fernando Mendoza. CJ Carr also was 5th in the country in passer rating last year, trailing only Mestamaker and Sayin among returning quarterbacks. So, like, and you have him 12th. Why do you have him 12th? Because you're the only garbage network that had him outside of the top 100 coming out of high school. You made a terrible evaluation of CJ Carr then, and instead of making an honest assessment that everybody on the planet can see that this kid is legit, you're going to double down on your dumb ranking that you had last time, and you're going to have him as the 12th highest ranked quarterback in the country. He's a consensus top 3 to 4 Heisman candidate, which I don't put a lot of stock in, to be honest with you. But I do put a lot of stock in the fact that he ranked in the top 5 last year in yards per attempt and passer rating. Top 5. And you have him 12th. You know, that's ridiculous.
I mean, this list was lazy. That's all it was. It was just pure laziness. And I don't really know who wrote it, nor do I care to go back and look and see who wrote it, but it was an absolutely lazy list. Brian, out of the top 100 guys on this list, 70 of them come from the SEC and the Big 12, Big 10. 70. Yep. So you're telling me that in all of college football, 70 of the best 100 players are just in those conferences. And spoiler alert, there's not players from every single team in either one of those conferences. Mm-hmm. It's Indiana, it's Ohio State, it's Michigan, it's Alabama, it's Texas. South Carolina has 3 players in the top 25. It went 3-9.
3-9. 3-9.
So you're telling me the other best 30 players in all of college football are in all of the ACC, all of the Big 12, and Notre Dame?
Yeah.
Come on, bro. Like that, it's just pure laziness. It's like, well, he plays for so-and-so team. There are some players on here that don't even have teams yet. They have a TBD listed to where the team should be on this list. But why are they ranked so high, Brian? What schools did they come from? one of the Big Ten or the SEC.
You think Josh Hoover's going to rank where he ranks if he was playing at TCU still? Come on.
Like this list is just pure laziness. Again, I file it into the cabinet of you don't watch football. You're confirming your rankings from 2022 and 2021 and 2023. You don't watch football. You just listen to, I guess, what ESPN and maybe Paul Feinbaum say.
Yeah.
I would have to imagine if 14 of the top 25 players in the country come from the SEC, apparently you didn't watch the SEC last year.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You definitely didn't watch Alabama.
No.
Because, Trev, they have 3 players from Alabama's defense in this list. Same as Notre Dame. They have 2, both of their safeties are in the top 100. Neither of Notre Dame's safeties are in the top 100. That is absolute garbage.
I don't understand how there's just such this disparaging gap between guys like Arch Manning and CJ Carr. And it's not just FanDuel. It's not just us on this show talking about how if CJ is who we think that he is, he could be a Heisman candidate. Yep. There are so many other outlets, ESPN, CBS Sports, a lot of different talking heads talking about how number 13 in the blue and gold is going to be a preseason Heisman favorite to win it because of what he did as a redshirt freshman this past year. But you're telling me that Arch Manning is the 15th best player in college football and CJ's the 86th?
Yep.
Come on, man.
And let's point out again that this isn't just about Notre Dame. Notre Dame's a big part of it. On3 had Damon Williams as a 3-star player coming out of high school. Damon Williams is not on this list. Sam Leavitt is 11th. Let me remind all of you out there that LSU cheated and got in big trouble trying to convince Damon Williams to come into the portal and go to LSU. And when they missed on him, then they went and got Sam Leavitt. So Lane Kiffin was willing to go through all that, pay all this money, do all this trouble to go out there and get Damon Williams out of the portal, take the public black eye to get Damon Williams out of the portal, and then settles on Sam Leavitt, who Miami also wasn't willing to make a hard run at. Schools were passing on Sam Leavitt until they had no choice but to take Sam Leavitt. And the guy that Lane Kiffin wanted is not even in your top 100. And why? Because he was ranked as a 3-star coming out of high school. If you don't have Damon Williams as a top 5 quarterback, I get it. He's still a young player. He's still developing. He's still emerging. But, Trev, this is a kid that last year threw for 3,065 yards, had 611 rushing yards, and accounted for 31 touchdowns and 8 picks last year. And as I mentioned, LSU was willing to do what they did to get him out of Washington and to have him come to LSU while Sam Leavitt was still a free agent and didn't turn to Sam Leavitt till after they missed on Damon Williams. And they're going to rank Sam Leavitt 11th and Damon Williams is not ranked at all. Really?
Makes no sense.
Really?
Makes zero sense. You're telling me that Mark Fletcher is 88? Did you not watch what he did in the postseason? Look, I'm no Miami sympathizer. Don't get me wrong here. He ran for $172 against Texas A&M, 90 against Ohio State, 133 against Ole Miss, and 112 off of 17 attempts against IU, 2 touchdowns. If they value what happens in the postseason so much, you're going to sit here and tell me that that's such a bad list, bro.
Yeah.
Such a bad list. Like Bo Jackson and Mark Fletcher went head to head in the playoffs. And Bo Jackson's 41st. You're going to tell me that there's a 40-spot gap between the two? Holy cow. That's so lazy.
That's the frustrating thing, Trev. That's the really frustrating thing is again, we're going to focus on the Notre Dame aspect of it, obviously, because we covered Notre Dame. But it's not just that. It's not just those two. It just overall, there's just a lot wrong with this list. But I think it also continues. Like I was actually talking with somebody from Indy today, and we were having a conversation about the perception of Notre Dame is still that it's a bunch of try-hard kids. Like I still think that people look at Drake Bowen and just think Midwest white linebacker and just assume tough kid, you know. And I remember reading that article that Bruce Feldman did before the playoff rankings, and they were talking to different coaches about Notre Dame versus Miami. And I remember one of the coaches talking about how athletic Notre Dame was and how surprised even he was. He's like, we thought we were going to be able to go ISO Drake Bowen and throw at him. And we were shocked he was running with our guys. You know what I mean? Like, we were surprised how athletic he was. And it's just so lazy, Trevor. So lazy. And the thing about Tay Johnson is, and Adon Schuler, we're not even projecting with those two guys of what they can. I mean, they're projecting that Chaz Coleman, based on what he did last year, 3 tackles for loss and a sack, should not be a top 300 player, much less a top 55 player. But we're not even projecting with those guys. Tay Johnson, in his first year as a starter, had 48 tackles, 4 interceptions, and 3 breakups. And a pick 6 on the road in November against a top 25 team. Adon Schuler is now a 2-year starter and one of the best secondaries of college football. Had 53 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 picks, and 5 interceptions this year. And had another pick of a 2-point conversion that he ran back for a touchdown on the road in November against a ranked team. And to further talk about how there's some, I mean, where's Mason Heinschel on this list? Like, where's he on this list? If we're going to talk about some of this, like, okay, why are we not talking about certain players? It's not just Notre Dame. Where's Kevin Jennings on this list? You know, like, there's so much just absolute nonsense with this list. But having CJ Card 86 and not having Adon Schuler and not having Tay Johnson is just, to me,
I mean,
man,
you don't have Tay Johnson, you don't have Adon Schuler, you don't have Christian Gray, who in another article by On3 was listed as one of the premier returners for Notre Dame, and not Leonard Moore. No surprise that there's no continuity there. Anthony Knapp is the only offensive lineman. Gerby Lambert's not on there.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? I mean, it's because they look at the uniform he plays in. If they saw a 6'7", 335-pound offensive guard that started every single game as a redshirt freshman, but he went to Bama, guarantee you he'd be a top 35 player. Guaranteed.
Yep. It's like, and you mentioned the Bo Jackson, Mark Fletcher thing. I mean, we could have that debate, but I just struggle with a 40 person difference. You know, I look at all the kids that I mean, Ole Miss and Mississippi State have multiple guys in the top 50, you know, and Notre Dame has like one defensive player in the top 50.
Well, look, I mean, even look at it this way. Deuce Robinson is 32nd, but Omar Cooper Jr. is 49th?
Yes, thank you.
What are we doing?
Again, it's not just Notre Dame. It's against Notre Dame. It's a garbage list, period. I mean, Deuce Robinson is at 32. Where's Charlie Becker? I mean,
70th.
I mean, you know what I mean? Like, really? Omar Cooper, 13 touchdowns, balled out in the postseason. Like, what are we doing here, man? Like, seriously, what are we doing here? What, Deuce was a highly ranked player coming out of high school. And look, Deuce was good last year, Trev. Like, Deuce was good for Florida State last year. He put up numbers. It's not even so much that I have a problem with Deuce's ranking. He had 1,000 yards last year, only 6 touchdowns. You know, but like, he had his best game was against East Texas A&M. He had 2 catches for 18 yards against Bama. You know, I mean, he's a good player, but 2 catches for 10 yards against Pitt. He had 6 catches for 87 against Miami. He's a good player. Why is Omar Cooper where he is? That's more of my beef.
100%.
So this whole thing, Trev, is just like, it is amazing how bad they are at this. Like, absolutely amazing how bad they are at this. Mm-hmm. Like, you made like basically like some sort of NFL draft like projection list more than he did anything else. Jordan Seaton at 44 is nothing more than reputation. That kid has not played like a kid who belongs there. Now, does he have tools and potential? Of course. But he has not actually played like that kind of player. And I'm still tripping that they have Bray Hubbard at 46 and neither one of Notre Dame's safeties. Like, I watched Notre Dame's pass defense last year rank what in the top 20, top 15 in passer rating. Actually, let's look at that. Notre Dame last year ranked 9th in passer rating. Alabama ranked 43rd. And yet it was Alabama that had more players in the secondary on this list than Notre Dame.
That's what I'm saying. You got Bray Hubbard where he is, but you have KJ Bolden, the safety for Georgia, at 77th.
Right.
Like,
name me a coach on the planet, including Kirby Smart, including Kane Womack, who would not trade Bray Hubbard for Tay Johnson, Adon Schuler, or KJ Bolden. Like, come on. Give me a break. It's an absolute joke. And they've got an Alabama offensive lineman on there. I'm like, what are we doing here? Like, seriously, what are we doing here?
Flat out bad list, man.
Like, I mean, it's so bad, dude. It's so bad. I'm looking at this and just laughing. I mean, it is absurd. Omar Cooper at 49. Come on, man. Trevor Lauk from Iowa's all the way down at 51. If he played in the SEC, he'd be in the top 25. Like, there's come on, man. The whole thing is just absolute
it's rough.
21
of the top 25 players are just from the Big Ten and the SEC.
Yeah.
Like, that's bad.
Yep.
But
yeah, it's very frustrating to constantly see this kind of stuff. It does, and we shouldn't be surprised by it, but I still continue to be surprised by it. Just the lack of it. And you know what's funny? And part of me is kind of happy about it because was it you and I that were having the conversation last night about, just I hope that Notre Dame's not letting or was it me and you? Like,
we talked about that after the show.
Yeah, preseason love about how highly ranked they are and this and that. And I hope they don't let that go to their heads. And I'm like, well, things like this help. So please keep doing this. Please keep doing this. Rutgers has more offensive skill players on this list than Notre Dame does. Yeah.
Well, I mean, they would have to have one. Like,
yeah. Well, I mean,
are you not counting quarterbacks?
I'm even including the quarterbacks.
Oh, including quarterbacks, yeah.
Like and if you just took non-quarterbacks, it's 2-0. So it, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, Brian, this was not the first, nor will it only be the last, because it is only January 22nd, and we still have like 200 some odd days until the football season starts. So
yeah,
there will be plenty more of these lists.
Yeah, and I'm very curious how some of these are going to go. I really am, because some of these things are just absolutely terrible. Now, if you go click on their like rankings page, you can actually go beyond the top 100. And so just to give you guys a sense of even some more of these predictions, they have Bryce Young at 103. Let me see. They have DeMond Williams at 115. So he wasn't even sniffing the top 100. Let's see. Where's the net? Adon Schuler's at 124. Tay Johnson's at 128. So like they're not even like, well, they're slightly outside of it. They have Quincy Porter at 141. He had 4 catches last year. And they have him ahead of Jordan Faison for Notre Dame. Like, I'm at 175 and I still don't see a Gerby. Jason Onye at 184. No Gerby Lambert in the top 200. No Jordan Faison in the top 200. No Drake Bowen in the top 200. I am now into the top 250 and still no. Drake Bowen is the number 257 college football player in the country. 257. Still no Jordan Faison. Still no Jaden Greathouse. Jordan Faison, according to them, is not a top 300 football player. Gerby Lambert is not a top 300 football player. Like, seriously. Like, yeah. Jordan Faison. I'm looking again. Did I miss Faison? Yeah, they have Jordan Marshall, the running back from Michigan, as the number 30 player in the country. He didn't even start for them last year until Justice Haynes got hurt. Like seriously, what are we doing here? And they have Justice Haynes at 143. Jordan Marshall didn't even start for them until Justice Haynes got hurt. And they have him ranked over 100 spots higher. They have Coy Parrish, the safety that was at Minnesota, at number 145. So again, I say to you, it's not just Notre Dame, but the fact that you have a top 300 list that does not include Gerby Lambert, Jordan Faison, Jaden Greathouse. Well, Jade's got to produce. They have Quincy Porter on there, and he had 4 catches last year. Why is he there? Because he was ranked as a 5-star by On3 coming out. Now, I hope they're right about Quincy Porter. I mean, but like, it's absurd to rank him there right now. No Tay Johnson in the top 100. No Adon Schul. They're not even in the top 115. You got to get down to the 120s. No Jordan Faison in the top 300. No Gerby Lambert in the top 300. No Francis Brew in the top 300. Really? Like, this list is absolute garbage. They had Jermaine Matthews at number 277. Trev. Terrell Anderson at 281. Xavier Lucas from Miami at 285.
That's bad.
Like, that's again, really bad. Folks, this isn't just Notre Dame bad Notre Dame rankings. This is just overall straight garbage. They have Jaden Bellamy, the former Notre Dame player, at UCF in here, but they don't have Jordan Faison. Like, these rankings are terrible, Trevor. Absolutely terrible. So, I said in a tweet, and I truly believe this. Drake Bone at 257. I can't get over that. I absolutely cannot get over that. But it's Eric Singleton at 251. It's like they woke up this morning and said, "Hey, let's meet." And in the meeting, they said, "Hey, what can we do to make ourselves look absolutely stupid right now?" And like, okay, yeah, that works. Let's do that. Nick Marsh at number 240. Seriously, Nick Marsh at number 240. Like, I'm just going through this, Trev. They have Ethan O'Connor from Miami, who I don't even think starts for Miami. 60 spots ahead of Xavier Lucas. Like, did Ethan O'Connor even start for them this year?
Not sure.
I think he was like part of rotation. He didn't, because Xavier Lucas, Keontae Scott were both better than them. And they had, bro. Okay. Oh boy.
I mean, it kind of makes you wonder if they just went to like ChatGPT or some sort of AI and just said, "Hey, make a list of the top 300 players in college football."
Yeah.
I mean, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah, this is pretty funny.
Yeah, that's really bad.
Yeah, That's some straight mess. But I had to Jace Brown from LSU, that kid from K-State, they have it 162. Sammy Brown at 169. Eli Bowen at 172. Eli Bowen was a dude for the Oklahoma defense this year. A dude. And they have him in the 170s. So, I mean, okay. Whatever you say, guys. So, yeah, Trev, I honestly, I think they could have come up with a better list if they would have used ChatGPT, actually.
I'm going to do it after the show and see what it cranks out.
Yeah.
Just for fun.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Somebody asked, Trev, I do want to address this, because Brandon Rouse says, why do you think this keeps happening to Notre Dame? I want to address this before we move on. I'm going to share what I think, Trev. and you tell me what you think. I think one of the things is just, like I said, it's confirmation bias. It's like some of this is just, hey, this is what we had guys ranked. Number two, I think they look at the fan bases, and the SEC and Big Ten have, without a doubt, the biggest fan bases. And so they're playing to the fan bases, because On3 is flat out 100%. Let me rephrase. 97% about just generating clicks. That's their model. Just, we're going to generate clicks. And then I think a part of it is just like Trev said, it's laziness. It's laziness, because they just look and say, well, we're just not going to put any thought into this, like any thought whatsoever into this. We're just going to go with these lazy takes and this lazy analysis. And there's still this assumption that Notre Dame is what we said. It's this group of try-hard guys that, they play hard, they're smart, but they're not great athletes. And as I was talking to somebody today, I was like, it was funny watching Georgia last year in the Sugar Bowl. Their early game plan was they thought they could get outside of Notre Dame to the perimeter. You remember that? The first couple series, they were like screens and they ran like a reverse, and they're like, yeah, we're going to get outside of Notre Dame. And just Notre Dame chased them down like it was nothing. Even on like the Jack Kaiser, like Gunnar Stockton really thought he was going to run away from Jack Kaiser and throw that ball away. And Jack catches him and knocks the ball out. And they tried to get outside of outside of Josh Burnham and Jalen Sneed. And they were like, nope, not happening, boys. And I really think that even coaches, you see this with coaches, that I still think there's this assumption that these Notre Dame kids are just smart, try-hard guys. And my thing is, well, they are smart and they do try hard. But the difference between this Notre Dame team and past Notre Dame teams is this team has elite football players on it and elite athletes. And as I said, look, there's a coach admitted we didn't think Drake Bowen was the athlete that he is. He said another coach was like, yeah, they're way more athletic than I thought they were going to be. And I think it's, and like, I understand other coaches, because I don't know how much coaches watch Notre Dame other than when they're prepping to play Notre Dame. But this is what you guys are supposed to do. This is supposed to be your job, is to watch college football and make honest analysis. And it's an absolute joke. And I think it's just further confirmation, the 70 of the top 100 are SEC or Big Ten guys. Well, that's where the two big markets are. And they're playing to their audience as opposed to putting an honest list together. And if you were smart, an honest list would get you even probably more clicks, because now you get people rage clicking you from the SEC and Big Ten, which drives even more than playing nice with them. So it is I don't get I'm like genuinely offended by this list, because this is now one of the big entities in college football. Like Josh Pate has partnered with them. My guys from Crane and Company are now partnered with them. They've hired Steve Wiltfong. They've hired Chad Simmons. Like, they've hired all these big name people. They brought a bunch of Rivals people over. Like, they're the big dog now. And this is the standard you're setting. This type of lazy bullcrap clickbait, like that's shameful, to be completely honest with you. It's absolutely shameful. And I'm even more ticked now that I saw. So I'm going to send you the link to this, Trevor. It's like the recruiting rankings page. So it's not the article. It's like if you click on a player, and it takes you to like the full ranking, and you can actually go down and click more. And that's how you get down to that. Like, Rutgers has more offensive players on this list than Notre Dame does. Like, it's absolutely bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. So, yeah, I'm pretty fired up right now. And like, I was starting to get over it, and then I saw the expanded list and saw them. They've got a kid from Wisconsin. It's a nice player. Mason Post is a nice player. Had a nice freshman year from him. They've got him way ahead of Drake Bowen. They've got him at 137. Like, it's absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah, I mean, to the question that came up in the chat, it comes down to one thing in my eyes, and it's just laziness. We could talk about And there's a lot of validity to what you brought up, Brian, about, the different markets and playing to the different fan bases. It's just laziness to me. It's what did they do in their top 25? They made sure that the household names were in there. Jeremiah Smith, Leonard Moore, Colin Simmons from Texas, Malachi Toney at 4. I have a lot of respect for Malachi Toney, and I think he's going to be an absolute dude next year. Do I think he's going to be the 4th best player in all of college football? No. No, I don't. I think he will absolutely be somewhere in the top 20 to top 20 to top 30. But they made sure they had the household names on there. Dante Moore, Jeremiah Smith, Sam Levitt, all these guys, Cam Coleman, Julian Sane, Arch Manning. They made sure those were in the top 25. Brian, I'm willing to guarantee you that you might be the first person outside of whoever published this list to go and look at the expanded list, because it's just laziness. They're preying on people's quick consumption of media. That's all that it is. Why does Notre Dame continue to get disrespected? I don't know. I don't know if it's just because of the championship drought, because you're not going to convince me it's because they watched them play.
Yeah.
If you watch them play, they wouldn't be continued to be disrespected. So it's one of two things, but it all boils down to laziness. It's either you're just going with the names that you can go with off the top of your heads, lazy, or you're not watching Notre Dame. Lazy. That's what it is. I don't give opinions on teams that I don't watch because I think that would be unfair. Like if like, and I've done it in these shows before. Sometimes after a weekend of football, you'll be like, "Hey, Trev, did you watch the Missouri, Western Kentucky game? That was nuts." And I'm like, "No, I didn't watch it." So I can't give an opinion on a player that had a big game, because all I'll do then is I'll go look at a stat sheet and then it's an empty argument on my end.
Yep.
So it just all comes down to laziness, no matter what way you boil it down to. So, and unfortunately, this won't be the last one to come out either. Like I said, it's January 22nd. There will be a lot more lists like this.
I mean, what's funny, Trev, is even within some of the rankings, it's like who would you say is Alabama's best defensive back? Would you say it's Bray Hubbard? Would you say it's Keon Sabb? Or would you say it's Zabian Brown?
Probably one of Zabian Brown or Keon Sabb.
Zabian Brown was not even in the top 200. He was 236, almost 200 spots behind Bray Hubbard. You know what I mean? Like, dude, what are we doing here? So it's not even like Notre Dame. It's like he was their best DB, in my opinion. And you've got him 200 spots behind Bray Hubbard. What? Like, what are we doing here? Like, I don't get it. I really don't get it. And I don't hate on Bray Hubbard. I don't. I think he's a good football player. But I think it's typical Alabama overhype. You know what I mean? So, yeah, it's very frustrating.
It's rough.
Very frustrating. Yeah.
Well, you can definitely rely on us here at Irish Breakdown to continue ripping these lists to shreds until we find one and come across one that actually dives into college football, how it's actually supposed to be looked at, not just looking at names and the teams or the conferences that they play within. But, folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to dive into the 2026 defense. Before we get there, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Also, folks, we are going to have a mailbag at the end of today's show, so be sure to get some of those questions, comments in. Put MB for mailbag or a little mailbox emoji. That lets us know to set that question aside. But we're getting ready to dive into part two here. All right, Brian, in part two of the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we're talking about the 2026 Notre Dame defense in a very similar format of how we talked about the 2026 offense yesterday. This is more of an introductory preview. Now, not to worry, we're still going to have film reviews and coverage breakdowns and breakdowns of line games and all that stuff coming much more down the offseason because, like I said before, it's only January 22nd. But this is kind of meant to turn the page on the 2025 defense. We're going to look at where they ended statistically. We're going to talk about what they've lost, what they're bringing back, some things that they've gained. We're going to talk expectations. We're going to talk about keys to having a successful defense. So, Brian, this is an extremely loaded segment. We're getting ready to dive into the Notre Dame 2026 defense. And based on how you and I have had conversations backline, what I've seen from the chat, especially at the start of today's show, A lot of expectations with this group going into this season.
No, there is. I mean, look, Trev, when we talk about this Notre Dame football team, we talk about this Notre Dame defense. I mean, it really is about, will they be what we hope that they can be, and be it consistently. I mean, it's one of those interesting things where when I look at this Notre Dame football team and I look at what they can be and what they should be, you know, it's hard not to get excited, Trev, about what they can be. And you look at the talent, and we're going to dive into numbers, and we're going to do all these different things. But then at the end of the day, it's kind of like, but will they play that way on a consistent basis? You know, will they play that way for, you know, in the big games? I mean, there's things that we're going to talk about this year where you're like, you know, dude, like, I'm not sure why you're bringing this up as a question mark, because look where they ranked. I'm like, yeah, like where they ranked, like that's pretty good. You know, I mean, that's good stuff. I'm happy they ranked there, but they didn't do that in the two biggest games they played. Or you could even make a case that they didn't do that in necessarily like the three biggest games they played. So there'll be things like that we're going to talk about, and we're going to point to that say, yeah, I'm happy that they showed this potential, but we have to have an honest conversation about, did they just improve as the year went on? Was it just because they played inferior opponents? Was it a combination of both? Was it just one or the other? And the answer to that question is going to determine just how good this defense can be. And we'll talk about a lot of other things related to Chris Ash and certain players and things along those lines. But at the end of the day, Trev, it really comes down to, this Notre Dame defense has an opportunity to be truly special. And we did not even get their best football last year for the first third of this, quarter of the season, if not third of the season. And they still finished the way they were. I mean, we said early last year, after I think it was Purdue game, like, look, they can rebound, but guys, they're not going to finish in the top 15 in scoring. They're not going to, and they did. They did. And yeah, it was it gets you excited about maybe what they can be this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of where I'm at, Trev.
I mean, if some of the things happen that we're getting ready to talk about here in this show happen for this Notre Dame defense, it has the potential to be one of the best that we've seen in recent history at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And I don't say that lightly, because they've had a lot of great defenses come through Notre Dame. But even in some of the great defenses, there were always some areas where they were lacking overall. The 2012 defense was exceptional, but you could argue, due to injuries and some different things, they lacked overall top-end talent on the back end of the defense. Front seven is the best that I've probably ever seen it in 2012 between the linebacking core and the defensive line, but there were some questions in the secondary, especially after Jamar Slaughter got hurt.
Yep.
The 2015 defense was special, but it lacked depth. You had guys like Jalen Smith, you had guys like Cole Luke and Kavari Russell, but then behind it, it was like, all right, well, you better stay healthy the entire season. The 2018 defense, spectacular defense. Don't get hurt, though. Like, if either of those defenses succumb to some of the injuries that Notre Dame has had in 24, 25, I don't know how highly we're talking about those defenses, because we talk about how many injuries they had to battle through.
Mm-hmm.
You could argue, going back to their 2D or going back to their 3D, this defense in 26 has the potential to be the best that it's been in quite some time. And I hope that that's a conversation that we're having. And they have a really strong foundation from the final 7 games of what they did this year. You posed the question, was it because of the level of competition they played? Did they actually make that big of a stride? I always find those things to be, the truth is somewhere in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to sit here and pretend that playing offenses like Stanford's and Syracuse's without Steve Angeli's and Boston College's doesn't have the same effect and the same draw as playing Miami's offense that just played for the national title, or Texas A&M's offense. I'm not going to try to paint that picture like, no, it's the exact same. Notre Dame's defense is just that elite. But you also can't disregard what they did in those games.
Right.
That's the point.
Nor can you disregard what they did against Arkansas. their team stinks. Yeah, their team stinks. Their offense is pretty good. And what they did to Arkansas was unlike anything that anyone in the SEC did to them. I mean, you just look at that Arkansas game, for example. So yeah, that team went 2-12 or 2-10. I don't care what they did. All right, cool. I get all that. And they're not a great team. But here's what I do know, Trev. Last year, Arkansas scored at least 23 points against every SEC team they played, and at least 31 points against everybody not named LSU. They scored 31 points or more in all but one SEC game last year. They scored 13. Actually, I'm sorry. They scored at least 17 in those games. I was looking at their points. They scored at least 17 in every game but Missouri. I mean, they scored over 17 in every game but Missouri. They scored over 22 against LSU, 24 against Auburn, and then they were in the 30s the rest of the game. 35 against Ole Miss, 31 against Tennessee, 42 against A&M, 35 against Mississippi State, 37 against Texas, 13 against Notre Dame. 13.
Like we've been saying, man, the truth always lies somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
But there are some gaps that they have to close in 2026, and there's things that they have to remain heading into the 2026 season as well. That's going to be key.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think at the end of the day for me, Trev, and we'll dive into the, we'll dive into the stats here in a second. I'm actually finishing up putting that together real quick because it's on my other computer, so I didn't bring that down here. But I think the thing for me that I look at is what makes it difficult is because when evaluating what Notre Dame will be, I have no questions about the talent. None. I have no questions about, can this team do A, B, C, D, E, and F, all those things that we talk about. Like, I have no questions about that. But the question comes down to, we did see two different defenses last year. And I don't just mean like, okay, they struggled in the first two games as they were getting used to Chris Ash and all that. Like that's fine. I understand that stuff happens. What I mean, though, is they literally looked like two different defenses last year. And so you have to ask yourself, what will he try to do this year? And before we kind of dive into, I'm going to kind of throw the order around a little bit because I think this just makes more sense. Who is the real Chris Ash? Because what they did, the reason I bring this up is what they did early was clearly what he thought he wanted to do with this team. And then adjusted to more of what they should have been doing. So clearly his instinct, his thought was, we're going to do this. My fear is, and my concern is, will he try to say, well, now that we have more experience, we're going to go back to that? Now that we've got guys coming back, now that I've got my guy in as the D-line coach, now that I got this, now that I got that, does he go back to that? That right there to me is why I can't completely buy into like, oh yes, they're going to be great on defense. Look what they did in the last X number of games. And all that's phenomenal, but you want to know why I still have a little bit of hesitancy? Because what you do when you start tends to be who you are. Some coaches change, some don't. Some coaches say, you know what, I've never coached a team like this. It's a different era. You can't compare what he did at Ohio State in 2014 to what he did now because the game has changed so much. He can't repeat what he did then. He also doesn't have Joey Bosa. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, you can't replicate that. So then I go to, so who is the real Chris Ash? Is it what we saw early in the year? Is it what we saw the second half of the year? Or ideally, the perfect combination of the two? And that is where I got to be honest with you, Trev. I still have a little bit of hesitancy when it comes to just how excited I am about what this defense can be this year. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, and I think that's fair. I'm not so much there. I think the real Chris Ash is a very fair question, but I don't know if it's, again, as black and white as he is who he was against Miami and Texas A&M, or he was who he was from Boise State on. It could be just maybe the real Chris Ash was somebody that needed to be molded to understand his personnel more.
Right.
Maybe. And I'm also aware of that fact too. I know you are as well. And maybe it's more that. And we've talked a lot on the show about, is he Miami, Texas A&M Chris Ash, or is he Boise State on Chris Ash? To your point about blending, I think that's more of what it will be. Because the personnel, as much as they return, we're going to dive into this a little bit, your personnel, like along the interior of the defensive line, is different. You're not going to have Kingston Viliama-Asa potentially for the beginning of the season, or at least in a full capacity like you did in October of 2025. Maybe the real Chris Ash is somebody that's able to mold and adjust to who is on his current roster. And the first couple games, albeit they were terrible, especially Texas A&M, maybe that was still him trying to figure out who his personnel was. I'm not trying to run cover for the guy, because the adjustment should have been made after Miami. They should have. And they got worse against Texas A&M.
And were pretty bad against Purdue as well.
They were. No, they absolutely were. But I also look at it, and this is just me, I also look at it, and I apply this to other things as well. It's like, when something starts to become the outlier, there's always the fear that it resorts back there. I guess my level of fear isn't as much as what some other people's are, but it's still you have to go out and show me that you won't do that. There's that piece to it as well.
And that's where I come down on, will it be a combination of both? Because ultimately, that's my hope, is that it's a combination of both. Because as we learned in the championship game the year before, sometimes, Trev, the other team is just better than you are at something that you're really good at. And you've got to have something to counter. You have to have something to throw them off. You have to have something to say, if this isn't working for us, is there anything that we can go to, or do we just kind of got to hope and wish upon a star that we're going to be able to get this done? I mean, that's ultimately what the question you have to ask yourself is, who are they? And I don't know that I don't need him to be what Al Golden was. I've said that a million times. I'm glad that he puts more value on stopping the run. I need it to be where, like you said, I think you nailed it well, Trev, when you said, maybe he learned a little something last year about what really works in college football, that it can't be this and it can't be that. It's got to be that middle ground. And that was my third option, which is, will he kind of say, look, I believe that in order to be successful, you've got to mix up your looks. You've got to be able to be an effective zone team. You've got to be able to do these things. We've got a bunch of 6'2" and 6'3" DBs. How do you not play some zone with those guys and make teams throw around me? That's fine. I've said this a million times. It's not zone versus man. That was never the debate. The debate was aggressive versus not being aggressive. It was focusing so much on scheme that you don't allow the players to play fast, that you don't attack, that you don't make it about the players. And so that's where I say, hopefully 3 is a combination of those two things. Or, yeah, we want to be multiple in how we line up and how we attack people, but we're still going to attack people and let the players play fast. Once he turned the players loose, they were amazing. And, like I said, I just still have in the back of my mind the way he went the first 3 games, and the fact that when they would get into blowout situations, he would revert right back to that. And that's why I can't completely buy in yet. But you can't ignore the last 7-8 games. You can't. It was too good. If you look at Trev, I'm even going to include. So Notre Dame this year finished 10th in the country in scoring defense. They were a top 10 team in both offense and scoring. They gave up 211 points. They gave up 27 points in the opener and 41 points in the second game. Even if you include the 30 points against Purdue, in the last 10 games of the season, they held opponents to 14.3 points per game. That would be 5th, behind only Ohio State, Indiana, Texas Tech, and Toledo. Even if you include the 30 against Purdue. If you look at where they were when they finally started to make the shift against Arkansas, and you just look at the last 9 games, they gave up 12.6 points per game. Like, that's really good.
especially once you factor in there was a pick six against Pitt that factors into that conversation. There were short fields given up by the offense. Yeah, man.
Garbage touchdowns by Pitt, garbage
Mm-hmm.
touchdowns by Stanford. Yes. I mean, they gave up at least 28 points last year again, or 27 points last year against backups. Actually, Purdue got one too. So at least 34 points last year against their backup defense. So that's very impressive.
Yeah,
Very
what they did after the first three games was exceptional. NC State didn't make it to the red zone on the first or second team defense.
Yep.
That's the level of what they're capable of being. But it's fair to warrant the question of how much of that will we see. Some of that's going to be dictated by the personnel, because I think of the secondary. Yes, big picture, you have Leonard Moore back, you have Christian Gray back, you have Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson back, but now your rotations are going to look different. You're not going to have Jalen Stroman rotating in at safety. You're going to have one of Luke Talich, Joey O'Brien, or Ethan Long. You're not going to have Leonard Moore on the field for 70 plays a game, potentially. Your personnel might be to where you don't even have to have Leonard Moore shadow a team's best receiver next year. You never know. Rotations are going to look different. So it's going to be very exciting to see what they do this upcoming year. That's absolutely for sure. I mean, the opportunity's in front of them to be one of the best defenses that they have.
Yep. I mean, this team has a chance to be a top 5 offense and top 5 defense. And I mean, that was Indiana's recipe, right? They were dominant on both sides of the ball. They won games with offense. They won games with defense. I mean, their offense couldn't do anything against Ohio State in the Big Ten title game. Their offense made a couple clutch plays late. Think of that big pass. Who did he hit on that? Was that Surratt that he hit on that, or was it Cooper? That big throw over the middle late in the game. I think it was a post route. I forget who he hit on that, but yeah, it was clutch. But like, you won that game not because of that big play. That was you won that game because you held Ohio State to 10 points, because you only scored 13. How many teams could at the beginning of the country could say, hey, we're going to hold Ohio State to 10 points, or we're going to only score, Ohio State's going to hold us to 13 points and we're still going to win? There's not a lot of teams that can do that.
No.
And they were able to do that. And Ohio State did that in the postseason. I mean, their defense was outstanding in the postseason until like the Jaden Greathouse one-man show in the third and fourth quarter kind of took over. He's catching one-handed touchdowns, juking Caleb Downs. Like, they couldn't do any of that stuff when the game was still in doubt. So I think that's the big key. So let's dive into the offense, Trev, or the defense statistically a little bit, and just kind of look at where they were last year. I think when you look at a lot of these things, some of these lower numbers I put in there they were 51st. I make that correction. They were 51st in yards per completion. I did not get that in there. It's in the next graph here that I have up, but I forgot to add it to that one. But they ranked 51st in yards allowed per completion, because they did allow some bigger plays. They didn't give up a lot of bombs, but they gave up a lot of 15s and 20s and things like that in certain situations. But as you see, the ones that are in gold there are all the stats they ranked in the top 10 nationally. That's, I think, 12. 1, 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 11. 11 of the categories we looked at, they ranked in the top 10 nationally. And in 4 categories, they ranked in the top 5. Not quite as many as the offense, but close. And this was partly my argument for why Notre Dame should have been a playoff team last year. There were, I think, 4 teams that ranked in the top 10 in like scoring defense and different things. And it was like Notre Dame. It was like Indiana, Oregon, Texas Tech, and Notre Dame, or something like that was it. And, like, their defensive numbers did match Alabama and Oklahoma, but Notre Dame had a significantly better offense. So, those are things that you look at, Trev, and say, when you look at these numbers, it tells you a lot about where Notre Dame was this year on defense at the end of the year. And when you consider how bad they were at the beginning, I think it puts a lot of context into this.
That's where you have to look at some of these numbers with some context. Obviously, things like tackles for a loss still need to be improved. But if you go and look at where they were at after the first quarter of the regular season, believe me, they were not 53rd. They cut their rankings in half. I mean, they ranked in the bottom half of college football in tackles for loss heading into the month of October. Then they really started to ramp it up. Then obviously there's things that need to carry over into the following season. Your rush defense, and I would even argue, has the potential than just being a top 10 rush defense.
That's right.
Obviously, pass defense needs to take a step up, but I go and look at things like passing touchdowns allowed. They gave up 14. Four of them came in their first 2 games. They gave up 10, the remaining 10. You know,
against and that included a game against the number 27 player in the country and Jaden Mayavan, another quarterback that they rank in the top 100, you know, right behind CJ Carr and CJ Bailey.
Very true. That is very true. But again, like we talked about with the offense, efficiency numbers is what I like to pay attention to. They rank top 10 in the country in yards per play. They rank top 10 in the country in yards per rush allowed. You know, you look at the passer rating efficiency numbers. They rank 4th in the country in interceptions. And I have a feeling they would have had higher than 21 if they would have played in the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. You look at passer rating.
There's somebody in the chat that's like, it should only account regular season. Well, no, in some areas, Notre Dame went slightly up. Some areas went down. For example, if you look at like 30-yard plays, well, yeah, if Notre Dame would have played a few games, maybe that goes up a little bit. It doesn't change their ranking much. And when we've pointed out when it does change, so as we said yesterday, yeah, Notre Dame finished with more points per game against Indiana, but that's only because of the postseason. Sure. But in other areas, it hurts Notre Dame. Tackles for loss, sacks. And as we saw last year from Notre Dame defense, the defense played pretty flipping good last year and went up in some areas. So it's not apples to apples or apples to oranges. The postseason doesn't change things very much. Instead of 10th, you might have been 8th or you might have been 12th. You don't go from 25th to 10th because of the postseason, because you didn't play in the postseason. Like your points were your point. You did well. And it tells you exactly who they are. Adding postseason numbers for all we know. And here's the other thing. Some of these teams are playing teams that are missing 75% of their starting lineups. So in playing one game, there were only 8 teams that played more than 1 postseason games, only 4 teams that played more than 2, and only 2 teams that played more than 3. So it doesn't change the story. The fact is if they're 10th here, it doesn't change the story if they would have gone and played in the postseason. They might have gone from 10th to 11th, or they might have gone up in some of those areas. So I just want to point that out because that keeps being mentioned in the chat. It doesn't change the story. And if it does dramatically change the story, we'll tell you it does, like we did with the scoring offense yesterday. These aren't cumulative numbers where they benefited from not playing less games. These are averages.
Well, and the point of this statistical discussion is about giving them a foundation for going into this upcoming season.
Correct.
It's like that. This isn't about, all right, they're just going to be 10th in the country in points per game next year as well. This is meant to be a springboard into the conversation that we're getting ready to have about what this defense is going to be next year. This helps paint us the picture of what areas do they need to improve on. They need to be better than the 68th best defense in the country in red zone defense.
Yep.
Because to Brian's point, it's not like if they played in the postseason, they'd go from 68th to 15th.
Right.
They have to get better situationally. They have to be more aggressive.
Which we'll get into a lot. Yeah, we'll get into that. But that was frustrating for me. But it's like it's anyway. Moving on, Trev. So it's not like you made the point there, right there. That's the key. It's what's the foundation for what they're working with going into this offseason. The foundation was you were a top 10 defense last year. If you look at where Notre Dame was in the Fermo Efficiency Index, you look at where Notre Dame was in the FPI, that's what the story tells. They were 6th last year in the Fermo Efficiency Index at the end of the year. 6th, that's pretty good, especially when you consider where they started from. I don't think Brian does rankings until like later in the year. He's like really good about that. He'll let some games get played, and then he'll say, like, hey, look, just so you know, it's still relying heavily on, preseason projections, and because otherwise you don't really have He's very honest about his method, which I really appreciate. And then later in the year, it's like, okay, this is all about this season. The FPI, the ESPN's FPI, they were ranked 7th in defense this season. They were a top 10 defense this season. You just weren't top 10 when it mattered most. And that's what shows the potential of this unit, that they were able to be top 10 despite the start, but also shows you like can they get to that point in time? And so like those are things that I want to see. And like I said, we'll dive into some of that later, but you're going to have to do that with some losses. What's interesting, Trev, is I don't think the defense suffered the losses that the offense did. I mean, the offense lost their best. You could argue that the offense lost their 3 best players for the entire season, and arguably their 5 best. You could argue that. Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, Malachi Fields, Eli Raridan, and up until the point he got injured, Billy Schrauth. Those are 5 of your 7 best players from last year on offense. Would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Defensively, you're losing Josh Burnham, which hurts. Your defense lost a lot. You're losing Josh Burnham. You lost Gabriel Rubio. You lost Donovan Heinisch. You lost Jared Dawson. Those are big losses. Those are important losses. And you lost Devontae Smith. The Devontae Smith loss it hurts, but it's kind of like he was so up and down from a health standpoint that I don't know that we ever got Devontae Smith's best last year because he was banged up, and Jalen Stroman was a rotation guy. It's basically all they're losing from this year's defense. Not nearly the personnel losses. And I didn't even mention like Emil Wagner, that they lost, and who they also lost, who was a 2-year starter and a team captain. I think the encouraging, exciting thing about the defense is, Travis, they didn't even suffer the personnel losses, the same kind of personnel losses that the offense did. I mean, Josh Burnham was a monster when he got put in the lineup, but the defense was playing dominant football before Josh Burnham started playing a lot more.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, imagine what they could have been if they'd have played a little bit more earlier, but
sure,
it is what it is. I mean, Gabriel Rubio went down in game 7, game 8, and they played the rest of the year without him. So when I look at it, it's you didn't have the losses that your offense did, in my opinion. Most of your top guys come back.
Oh, yeah. I mean, offensively, you lost all 3 of your captains. On defense, you returned 2 of your 3. And arguably, if Donovan Heinisch didn't suffer that shoulder injury, he had the opportunity to come back. And if he wasn't hurt, I'm fully confident he wouldn't have retired from football. And that's the outlook of the defense. Your entire linebacker rotation returns. Every single one. I know you lost Anthony Sacca. You lost Preston Zinner, who was kind of a hybrid linebacker, edge rusher. They moved him to edge. So you had some losses, but when all 5 of your guys that rotated in 2025 come back, you're deep. All 4 of your starters, premier starters in the secondary between both outside corners and both safeties also return. So that's going to feed into why this conversation is a little bit different than what we had yesterday on the offense, because there was guys that were relative unknowns that we were talking about yesterday in the offense. It was if Mylan Graham and Quincy Porter pan out, if Jaden Greathouse becomes a more integral part of the offense, if Joe Rudolph makes the correct adjustments along the offense. For defense, we'll have conversations around the D-line, but a lot of it just kind of rests on the shoulders of Chris Ash. That's why we started off this whole conversation with what version of him do we get? Now, these numbers were set forth by a lot of the guys that you lost, but what you return, Brian, is so exceptional. And you return everything. You return star power. You return key rotation guys. You return your gritty veterans, and you need all of it to be able to win a national championship. Again, Notre Dame is still tied on FanDuel for number 1 odds to win the national. Tied second, tied with Indiana, right behind Ohio State to win the national championship. You're going to need all of those guys and all hands on deck in order to get to and be the team that you're meant to be. But that's what's so exciting about this conversation. That's why we believe that this defense has the potential to be one of the best we've seen come through South Bend in quite some time.
Yeah, it does. I mean, the star power that's returning to this defense is outstanding. I mean, it's Leonard Moore, Tay Johnson, Adon Schuler in the secondary, Booba and Christian Gray. I mean, you could argue Christian Gray is the 4th best returning DB that Notre Dame's going to have next year. And for a lot of teams, he's 1 or 2. A lot of top 25 teams, he's 1 or 2. You've got Boubacar Traore. You've got Drake Bowen. Eventually, Kingston Viliama-Asa will be back. And, and he's another player with star power and talent. And part of that, what you have coming back, it's you're bringing back 2 first-round talents at defensive end. You're bringing back, I would argue, 5 NFL like day 1, day 2 caliber talents at linebacker. You could debate maybe a 5th one is more day 3. But I would argue the guy that is probably day 3, Jalen Sneed, is the best athlete of the group. And then you return the best secondary in college football, according to everyone other than On3. With Tay Johnson and Don Schuler, Leonard Moore, Christian Gray. And then you bring in, the talent that they brought in. It's like the D-line took a hit, Trev. But then you go out and you say, okay, you lost Josh Burnham. You lost Jared Dawson. You lost Gabriel Rubio. You lost Donovan Heinisch. So what do you go out and get? You add Keon Keeley. You add Francis Brew. You add Tion Gray. You add Rodney Dunham. You add Ebenezer Utade. You add Tiki Hola. And you add Elijah Golden. Not to mention Chris Burgess is now a year older. Davion Dixon's a year older and healthy. And then your secondary is already elite, and they still went out in the portal and added DJ McKinney and Jaden Sanders, along with one of the best DB classes in all of high school football. And so you're looking at this team saying you were already stacked and loaded, and now you've just you reloaded in places you didn't even need to reload. You know what I mean? Like, you didn't need DJ McKinney and Jaden Sanders. But Notre Dame was like, look, we want depth. We want to be able to move some pieces around. We want some experience. They went out and got it. And so you not only return big-time talent, but the needs you did have, you filled with, I would argue, better overall players through the portal and the high school ranks.
Well, and they have a perfect complement on the defensive side of the ball between proven, experienced stars and potential breakouts. Whereas on the offensive side of the ball, we were kind of relying on a lot of potential breakouts. A Will Black breakout, a Mylan Graham, a Quincy Porter, and Aeneas Williams, whoever steps up at tight end, potentially a center, potentially a right tackle. Like, there's a lot of different things that kind of have to work in your favor. But on defense, you have those veterans. You have that experience and star power to rely on, and that's extremely promising. You listed off a bunch of them: Bryce Young, Tay Johnson, Christian Gray. I mean, and breakouts are at several different levels. It's not breakout in terms of, okay, are you going to play? It's what level can you take it up to? And this defense is loaded.
Yes.
Loaded with talent. And that's why a lot of the onus falls on the coaching staff, because talent is not the issue, contrary to what outlets like On3 or ESPN want you to believe. Talent is not the issue.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you look at defensive end. If Notre Dame's returning defensive end rotation next year was just Bryce Young and Keon Keeley coming in, I'd be pretty excited. And, with Logan Thomas and Rodney Dunham and Ebenezer Utade, like, look, it's young, it's unproven. They've got to show me, but boy, the talent is legit. And that's not even, and again, I'm taking out their best player. We'd still be excited about that. And now it's Boubacar's your guy, and you've got Bryce and Keon plus the freshman plus Logan Thomas. As far as like breakouts, I mean, Bryce Young to me is a guy that I have poised as a breakout potential player. You look at the second level. I don't know that there's anybody that's going to break out. I think Jaden Osbury and Drake Bowen have already been pretty flipping good the last 2 years. Jalen Sneed's been a good player. You maybe Madden Faramo could be a breakout. Kingston when he gets back. It's like if Kingston goes off when he gets back, you're like, yeah, he kind of started to do that last year.
Yeah.
He's already a pretty good player. And then with Tay Johnson, I have him as a breakout, not from a standpoint of he wasn't good last year. He was good last year, but, maybe now in year 2 taking that big star jump. And then, you talk about a Don Schuler and Tay Johnson. I don't care what On3 says. That's the best returning safety tandem in college football. And Christian Gray. What if he moves inside? Does that let him be more aggressive? Does that let him play to his style more? Do they move him inside at times, keep him outside? But he's a kid we're always going to be waiting to kind of take that next jump and be the good version of Christian Gray all the time instead of just 85, 90% of the time, which he's very good now, 85, 90% of the time. 90% of Christian Gray's film is outstanding. 5% of it's just kind of, it's okay. And then 5% is like, dude, what are you doing there? But like the talent is enormous. He's a breakout player. And that doesn't even get into like young guys like Chris Burgess, Armel Mukam, Cole Mullins, Logan Thomas, Madden Framo, as I mentioned. DJ McKinney potentially is a breakout player coming over from the portal that got overlooked because he was playing beside Travis Hunter in 2024. And I did find out last night, Trev, the reason his film looked so much different is he played through injuries all year. He was banged up last year, battled through it, but he was not 100%. But his 24 film is outstanding. How's he going to be fitting into this offense or this defense? And then, of course, there's the portal guys. I mean, Tion Gray and Francis Brew, Keon Keeley. There's so much potential talent and breakout talent on top of the fact you already returned pretty impressive star power already. And you return a lot of guys who have played on a playoff team that made a run. I mean, you're talking about trying to make a run to the playoffs next year. You've got several starters that were part of that run. I mean, yeah, Boubacar wasn't. Bryce Young was. Keon comes with 2 playoff games under his belt. He played in the playoffs this past year. Tion Gray played in 3 playoff games. You look at the linebacker level, Drake Bowen, Jaden Alsbury, Jalen Sneed, Kingston. Well, Kingston didn't because he got hurt, but 3 of your linebackers were all key parts of your linebacker rotation in 2024. Adon Shula was a starter. Christian Gray was a starter. Leonard Moore was a starter. Go ahead.
Even Kingston came back. He just missed the Indiana game.
Yeah. Oh, that's
right. He played against Georgia. He played against Penn State and played against Ohio State.
Right, he had a second half sack against Penn State. That's right. I forgot about that. That's right. No, he had the pressure that then led to Rod Hurd making the sack. Sir. Yeah. But he played well in that game too. That's a good point. I completely forgot that Kingston came back. So now you have 4 linebackers that played in that rotation. Mm-hmm. 3 of your starting DBs this year were guys that were starters on that playoff run. And then, like I mentioned, 2 of your portal additions on defense were part of a playoff team. One of your receivers was on a playoff team, a championship team, but he didn't play a ton, but he was on the team. And then he did play, this year in a for a playoff team as well. So this is a team that understands what it takes and the pressure that goes with that type of scenario. So there's a lot to be excited about, Trev, when you go through the roster and you break down, what this team can be, what this team should be. It's easy to get very excited about who Notre Dame is going to be. And I do feel when you talk about this team, I think the floor is a lot higher than it was than what it should have been for our perception last year. When I look at last year's team, I do think that maybe there was a little bit of not putting enough. We just had this don't screw it up thought process with Chris Ash that I don't think we put enough focus on the fact that he was going to come in with his own ideas. Like he was going to come in and change some things. I mean, we should have assumed that there would have been some changes. Well, and not to the degree that we saw. I'm not justifying that, but I think that's why I say the floor wasn't necessarily as high as maybe we thought it was going into last year. This year, I think there is legitimate reason to feel like the floor of this team, in my opinion, is of a top 7 to 8 defense. The ceiling is they could be the number 1 or 2 defense in the country next year.
Absolutely. I mean, for me personally, one of the things that I overlooked was also the current state of the roster. Like I was looking at it through the lens of how I'm currently looking at it right now, the names, what I knew that they could be. But when you go back through and you look at what the roster is and what it was going into 2025, it was You're getting Boubacar back. It's like, yeah, he hasn't played football in almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you got Bryce Young. It's like, yeah, a true sophomore that's still really raw. Leonard Moore is going into just his second year as a starter and wasn't even the full-time starter for all 16 games in 2024. Adon Schuler is going into his second full-time year as a starter. Same with Drake Bowen. Yeah, so Kingston was going into his sophomore year. So I was looking at it personally through the lens of how I'm currently looking at it right now. And that was my mistake with looking at it from like if Chris Ash got hired this year with the experience that they have now married up with the talent, it would have been like, okay, dude, like literally just don't screw it up. These guys are humming. They're 2-year, 3-year starters. They've been a part of this program. They've been a part of, playoff runs and multiple 10-game win streaks. Just come in and kind of don't crash the car. I would be more comfortable saying that this year opposed to last year where there was still development that was needed. Because we had conversations like, Leonard Moore was amazing for a true freshman. Can he be amazing just as a corner?
Yep.
Hey, Adon Schuler was great as a redshirt freshman. Can he be great just as a starting safety in Notre Dame's defense? So that was an overlook on my part. But yeah, Brian, I'm with you. The outlook is different and it's less precarious, I guess would be a good word to use going into this season, because last year it was an unknown of what we were going to get from Chris Ash. Now it's just a question of what version will it be of him and will it be the best?
Mm-hmm.
And if he strives to do that, that's going to be a really good spot to be in for this defense. That's for sure.
It is. Can I just point out something real quick, Trev, to kind of go back to our original topic? They've taken down that tweet and the story has gone off their front page of the top 100 rankings. I still had that one page up, so I printed off their top 300. I saved it as a PDF, so they try to go back and change it. But yeah, the tweet is gone.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Maybe they realized the disrespect of the Notre Dame defense was a little bit too great. Too great. So anyway, going back to I just thought that was hilarious. Going back to the list that to the discussion at hand, Trev. Final piece is going to be, before we kind of get into expectations and the 3 keys to success, it's going to be with Chris Ash. He ultimately is going to be a guy that by the end of next season, Notre Dame fans are going to be like, this guy, you got to go. Or he's going to be a guy that's in the conversation for the Broyles Award winner. Like,
absolutely.
That's how I feel. And it could go one or two directions. If I were to guess right now, I'd probably go towards Broyles Award winner, because I do think the defense is going to be good. He'd have to make a conscious decision to just say, I know what we did last year was really good, but screw it. I want to do this, and we're going to do this. And I just have a hard time believing that he's that dumb, or that Marcus Freeman would allow that. Like, I think at the end of the day, what we're going to see is what you talked about at the beginning. It's, look, this is what I believe in, but you know what? This thing over here worked pretty good too. When I first went to college, Trev, I grew up gap scheme, counter, power, ISO, and then I started watching this Alex Gibbs guy with the Broncos, and I'm like, this zone stuff is legit. And eventually became a zone guy. And I've seen people do opposite. You either say, this is what I am, and I'm eventually going to get there, or, hey, man, there's some things Al Golden did that I really like. There's some things that Marcus Freeman believes in that I really like. There's some things Mike Mickens believes in that I really like. Let's take that, and then let's take some of the principles that I believe in. Let's put them together and build something beautiful. And if Chris Ash is willing to do that, I do think this how he finishes his career at Notre Dame, whenever that may be, is going to be very different for how he's perceived than how he is right now. Because, there's still people on our message board and on Twitter and on our chat will say, like, I want him gone. I don't want him back. Like, they're still that mad about how the season started. And I can't blame them, because at the end of the day, how that season started on defense is why Notre Dame was sitting at home in December and January. I get that, but I do think there's an opportunity for Chris Ash to say, okay, The first part of my performance was not great, but wait till you see the encore. Sometimes part 2 is better than part 1. Lord of the Rings is a perfect example. You know, part 2 was better than part 1, and I think you could argue part 3 was better than part 2. Usually, sequels aren't as good as the original, right? Like Rocky just kind of – 4 was great, and then 5 was very forgettable. But I joke, but, like the sequel, I think, has a chance to be a lot of fun.
Brian, diving into part 3 of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. We're continuing our conversation with the 2026 Notre Dame defense. And look, we've talked a lot about what they bring back, the star power. We've talked a lot about what foundation was laid. We have a better idea of what to expect a little bit more from Chris Ash. It's not 100%, but like we've talked about, great coaches always find ways to adapt. All of those things are great. And right now you have an insane amount of, sticking with cooking analogies, an insane amount of ingredients in the cabinet and in the fridge. But now we have to get into the expectations conversation, because you and I, along with 339 other people in the chat, believe that Notre Dame has the opportunity to go on a run unlike one that we've seen, at least in my lifetime. And for people who are older than me, one that we haven't seen really in the last couple decades. And so what is the expectation for this Notre Dame defense going into 2026? And I think the best way to start is, can they play elite defense all season? That's the key. We can't be having conversations of, midway through November, does so-and-so revert back, or are they who they are now? We need to be having conversations at the halfway point in the later window of the regular season of, this is just who they are.
Yep.
And that's where would they have to be.
That's the biggest thing. I mean, look, you can say, hey, man, once Chris Ash got comfortable, once he learned the players, what they're good at, what they're not good at, what they can handle, what they can't handle, what they can take in mentally and then execute physically. Once you learn all that, and I don't care how much, if Al Golden sat him down for 5 hours and just went through every single player on the roster, it's going to be good for Chris Ash, but at the end of the day, he still has to learn it within his system, within his coaching style, with what he likes to do from a play calling standpoint. And say, look, once you got a hang of it, defense rocked. And it did. But you also can't ignore that the quality of the teams that they played after the first 2 games was not what it was the first 2 games. So we can say, well, the way they played late in the year, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But at the end of the day, Trev, you can't just assume that, because they weren't playing teams as good as Texas A&M and Miami. They weren't. And so that's the expectation in 2026 is going to be, no, you're never going to not have the best. Like, there's so many double negatives there, but I'll put it, you're always going to have the most talented group on the field. You will not play a team in the regular season, with all due respect to Miami, that top to bottom has better players than you have. So there's no excuse for another Texas A&M. There's no excuse for another Purdue. And now it's time to play that way all season, and not the ups. It was down early, then it got better, and then there was a couple, blips on the radar. The USC BC games weren't like the best performances of the season, and some of that's going to happen. But can you be a dominant defense from start to finish? I mean, look, it took Indiana a game to get their defense on the right page, right? I mean, they gave up over 200 yards rushing to Old Dominion, and then they fixed it pretty quickly, and then they were rocking and rolling. But that's what I'm looking for is, are you going to play at that level all year? That's expectation number 1.
Absolutely. And to your point, Brian, it's going to look different relative to the competition. Notre Dame in the playoffs can still play extremely dominant championship caliber defense, but it's going to look different than when you play Syracuse. It's going to look different than when you play Stanford. But there are things that have to remain consistent in this defense where we can still sit back and point to, this is still a championship caliber defense, even though big picture, they might have allowed 20 points to Miami, opposed to, maybe the week before they only gave up 7 points to North Carolina. Just using that as an example. How are some of the ways that they do that, Brian? And it really bleeds into our next point, and it's just remaining aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
that is one of the things that you have to remain overarching. Your philosophy as defensive coordinator, talking to Chris Ash, has to be you are aggressive no matter who you play.
It's one of those things, Trev, where coaches can run the risk of trying to have too many answers. And if you want to know what ultimately was the issue for Chris Ash last year, it's that he went into the season trying to build an NFL defense that had the answer for everything. And that's something that Brian Van Gorder did. The difference between the two of them is that Chris Ash is not Brian Van Gorder. I'll just leave it at that. He's not Brian Van Gorder. He's a lot smarter and a lot better than Brian Van Gorder, even though the issue was the same. And we see that a lot of times with coaches, especially after they spend some time in the NFL. And so I think that was something that you look at and say, he backed off that. They simplified, they got more aggressive, because in college football, you don't need to have as many answers as you need in the NFL. You don't have Aaron Rodgers and Peyton Manning and Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and guys like that at quarterback that can, you just don't face the same things. The rules are different. The players are different. They're younger. Even a team like Indiana is not doing what NFL teams are doing. And so you don't need to have answers for everything. Sometimes your answer is just, we're better than you. And I'm going to make sure my guys are lined up and understand some basic principles, and then we let them attack. And then there will be complexity within that. And so, but you also can have not enough answers, right? Like then you get too simplified. Chris Ash finding that balance between those two things is what he's going to have to do this year, because you need to allow your defense to remain aggressive, play fast, build around your talent. It's got to be about how athletic Drake Bowen is and Jaden Osbury are and Jalen Sneed and Kingston and Madden and Leonard Moore. It can't be about Drake Bowen knows that if they do this quick motion, I've got to audible everything. And if they do this, I got to audible that. And I got to check to this. And I got to check to that. And I got to read this. And I got to, run fit off of this and all these complicated things. Dude, just let him freaking fly to the football. Have some checks. He's got to know this. If they do this, we got to get lined up here. We can't get out leveraged. We can't get outnumbered. We've got to be prepared for this. We've got to know this. There's a lot to it anyway. But at the end of the day, let your front attack. Let your linebackers play downhill. Let your secondary be aggressive. And if he can balance those two things of being advanced enough and taking advantage of the intelligence of Notre Dame players, while also taking advantage of the athleticism of the Notre Dame players, then this defense will be elite. That right there, that key right there is what will determine number one and what will determine everything else. Can he say, we're going to be schemed up well, but not to the degree where it takes away from us being aggressive, attacking, disruptive, and playing fast? That'll be a huge key. And it's an expectation that I have of, dude, you're in year 2 now. That's what you have to be. If you can't figure that out in year 2, then you need to be somewhere else. And I don't think Chris Ash got to this point in his career with the success he's had at different places by not being smart enough to know that. I just refuse to believe that.
Oh, agreed. And look, every single answer that a coordinator has to have isn't necessarily on the chalkboard. Sometimes it's on the depth chart. Your answer is what you said. It's you just don't have a receiver that can beat Leonard Moore. You just don't have an offensive tackle that can stop Boubacar. You don't have an offensive tackle that can continue to hold Bryce Young at bay. You don't have a running back that can make one of Adon Schuler and Tay Johnson and Drake Bowen and Kingston and Jaden Osbury all miss in the open field. Sometimes those are just the answers. Now, that being said, you do still have answers that you have to come up with in the film room and on the chalkboard and out on the practice field. And one of those is marrying up all 3 levels of your defense. That is something that absolutely has to be there. Absolutely has to be there. Look at the difference just between marrying up your pass rush and your coverage from this past season. Notre Dame finished the year with 21 interceptions. They had like 4 in their first 3 games. And once that pass rush started to get married up with the coverage and the pass game, this was an extremely hard offense. And that's not one that I look at and say, well, the level of competition. Dude, you face Maddox Madsen, who was in the playoffs before. You faced CJ Bailey. You faced Jade Maeva. You faced a receiving core that had Reed Harris. The list goes on and on. It really does. And so as long as they marry up all three levels, that's another expectation going into this year. That's a next step in Chris Ash's evolution as a defensive coordinator.
Yeah, agree. I mean, it all ties together, Trev, right? You've got your guy at defensive line. You've got a guy that I've been told you have a lot of faith in at linebacker. You've got the best DB coach in the business. You've got a lot of talent coming back. You can do more things now than you could have done early last year. There are things you did in week 1 and 2 that didn't work that you could probably do now and play at a high level. And that's good. Do those things. But it really comes down to Marcus Freeman said this 50 times last year. And it felt like the first month, we got to marry the front with the coverage. And I'm like, yeah, duh. Like, why did you not have that figured out before you started 0-2? And that's football 101. And so getting that to be the key is, okay, what are our strengths as a football team? And what are the areas we're not as strong? Now, it may not be areas that are going to affect us against Wisconsin, but your goal is still, we're building to beat Indiana. We're building to beat Ohio State. We're building to beat Georgia. We're building to beat Bama. We're building to Oregon and Texas Tech and teams like that. If you're building to beat those teams, then you'll beat everybody in your roster. You're building to beat Miami. And finding what those answers are. And like you said, Trev, it's you've got these 3 different levels. How do you incorporate all 3 of them together to get one cohesive defense? You need great development, you need elite talent, and you need great scheme. That's what Indiana had this year. Great technical development. I mean, it's a masterclass watching Indiana's defense in the playoffs. Just never beat themselves. One time, the whole playoffs, I remember them getting out leveraged. One time, it went for a 57-yard touchdown. And that was a pretty well blocked play too. I mean, you got to give Miami a little bit of credit for that one. And it was a great read and run by Mark Fletcher, similar to what Notre Dame did to them last year. And they were pretty good after that. I would argue that Notre Dame has better talent than what Indiana had last year. Now you got to find out, is the technical development as good? And is the ability to allow your players to play smart and fast and decisive good as well? And if you can marry those 3 levels up, like, look, I think the defensive line is built in a way that, I mean, there should be stretches in games where Drake Bowen never gets touched if you're using it correctly. Or Kingston or Jaden or Jalen Sneed or Madden, whoever. And you've got to make sure that you're using your talent up front to make sure that you're putting your secondary in position to make plays as well. And so marrying those things together. Look, Trev, this could be Notre Dame's best secondary in 30 plus years. I mean, this could be your best secondary since like 1992, 93. Like this could be your best back 7 in 30 years. You've got to know how to utilize that. And I felt like they neutralized that group on their own in the first 2 games last year by how they ran their coverages and how they utilized their linebackers. Man, you've got a chance to have a special group. You got to utilize it the right way.
Yeah, I mean, because of the talent on the roster and who comes back, the length, the speed of what you have on the back 7, passing yards are going to be at a premium for any team that lines up against Notre Dame's defense. Like, this is not one. This is something that you talk about taking yards personally. The secondary has the opportunity to completely shut out any passing offense they face in the regular season. And I understand they're going to be going. Bear Bachmeier comes back. Malachi Toney's still going to be at Miami. I understand all those things. But there's a lot of things that point in the direction that this could be just a generational type of secondary. And I don't throw that term around lightly. But when you do something that you haven't done in 20 to 30 years, I mean, at least in my generation, you haven't seen it much. There's always been pieces here or there. You've had Ben Morrison and Cam Hart on the same one. But then you got a guy like DJ Brown starting in the secondary, who's a quality football player, but he's not neither one of a Don Shula or Tate Johnson. You would have Kyle Hamilton some years, and then like the list kind of ended there. In other years, you would have guys like, you go back all the way to 2007, you had somebody like Darren Walls, but he wasn't developed the correct way, unfortunately. So we've seen this list for years and years and years. But if Notre Dame secondary plays the way that I believe that they are capable of doing, assuming that they're put in the right position to succeed, I know Mike Mickens is going to do his part in doing that. But to your point about marrying everything up, and if it does get married up, it won't surprise me if they're playing for the national title at the end of the season. It just won't. You and I were talking on the phone yesterday. It would surprise me more if they didn't make it than if they did, because of the makeup of the roster. That's just me personally. I might be getting the cart too far in front of the horse here. And actually, I misspoke earlier. On FanDuel, they are not tied for second anymore. They are tied for first with Ohio State to win the national championship in 2026. Behind them, tied for second, is Indiana and Texas. So this is an exceptionally talented group, but again, there's still other areas that they're going to have to focus on. A lot of other areas. And they're going to have to bring it up to speed. One thing is they're going to have to finish better, Brian. Yeah. Over the course of the season, they're going to have to finish better.
Yeah. I mean, you talk about expectations for a team. Finishing is huge for Notre Dame. And that means two things. One is the easy one, like, dude, don't give up late touchdowns against Pitt. Don't give up late touchdowns. Don't give up 2 late touchdowns against Stanford. Let your young guys go in and attack. Let your young guys go in there and run the same defense that you've been running with the starters. I'll give Mike Denbrock a lot of credit. When he put Kenny Minch in the game last year, he let him throw the football. He threw a bomb early against Arkansas, threw the ball down the field several times last year. He let Kenny go play and put some tape together. And then also it's a great chance to let Kenny get some work in case Kenny's got to step into the starting lineup for some reason if CJ gets hurt. Same thing with your defensive players. Like turn them loose, let them attack. But more importantly is finishing in the games that matter. Here's the reality. Notre Dame played three Power 4 teams last year that finished the season ranked. And they went 1-2 against those teams. And in both games that you lost, you had the opponent had the ball with less than 4 minutes left in the game, where the game was either tied or you led. And in both instances, if you make stops, you win one for sure, and you're giving your offense, who had not been stopped in a quarter and a half, the football with a couple minutes left. Who knows what would have happened? But Miami was not stopping Notre Dame in that third and fourth quarter. Second half of third quarter and the fourth quarter. They just weren't. Once CJ threw that pick in the third quarter, they were not stopping Notre Dame after that. In a situation where Notre Dame could be balanced, they were able to pin their ears back when there was a minute left and they were at their own whatever and had no timeouts and had to throw. But you're at least 1-1 if you could finish those games off defensively. Now, look, the defense did some nice things to keep Miami down. There was twice Notre Dame turned the ball over. They made them miss a field goal once. They held them to a field goal another time. So it wasn't like they were just terrible the whole time. You know what I mean? Like, they did some things. But you couldn't finish off at the end of the half. Get to that here in a little bit. And you couldn't finish off the end of the game. And I would even argue the USC game. Yeah, you ended up having that big forced turnover, but I would argue that you were struggling to stop USC at that point in time. And then USC runs a trick play, which I thought was a terrible call. And you end up forcing a mistake on that. I think Lincoln Riley flinched and Notre Dame took advantage. But you were having a bit of a tough time shutting them down at that point in time. You had given up a second half lead. Fortunately for you, Marty Biagi's unit gave you the lead right back. And then I believe it was that next possession, Trev, that Notre Dame went down, or USC, I think, went down. Let me pull it up and try to refresh my memory a little bit. But after the kick return for a touchdown, that gave Notre Dame a 27-24. Let me see here. Where's the touchdown? So let's see, 34-24. USC scored a touchdown. Notre Dame returned the kick. USC went down. and Christian Gray picks it off. You get a missed field goal by your offense, and we started on that. And then that's when they went down the field and had the mistake. They were driving. They had gotten into Notre Dame territory, and that's when they went for the 2. And you took advantage of it. So good job on your defense. But you're giving up some yards at times. But you couldn't do that in the first 2 games. You had 2 chances to finish those games off with your defense, and you went 0 for 2 on them.
And that conversation isn't even just in the big moments. Obviously, the big moments are the ones that are highlighted. But is Notre Dame's playoff outlook a little different if you don't give up one more score against Pitt? Is the playoff outlook different if you don't give up 20 point what'd they score? Like 14 points in the fourth quarter against Notre Dame? Talk about Stanford.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like? What does that look like against Boston College if you don't end the half allowing that field goal to bring the game to 12-10 going into halftime? Mm-hmm. So finishing is season-wide here. And if their motto is truly leave no doubt, well, putting in your second-team defense and just asking them to run cover 4 the entire second half, that's not leaving that's leaving room for doubt.
Mm-hmm.
Now, do I think that would have played a factor? No, because Notre Dame won by 29 points on the road. Alabama had an ugly win over a team with a losing record, and they still made the decision to flip them. Do I think that would have happened anyways? Sure. But would it have made it a harder discussion if Pitt didn't have that final touchdown on the last play of the game? I don't know. Maybe. What would it have looked like if you would have ended the first half better against Boston College and not came out of halftime on one of the worst defensive drives that they had in the season? And that's saying something, but it went for 11 minutes and 21 plays against Boston College. So I don't know. Finishing, it's over the course of the season. But yes, big games, I'm with you. That's definitely a highlight topic of that. That's for sure. That's absolutely for sure.
Yep. Yeah. And then the final piece, Trevor, this is a big one. You're going to have a very deep football team this year. You've got to find a way to properly utilize it. That could go one of 2 directions. One is you over rely on your depth, which prevents you from getting into a flow, or you underutilize your depth where your starters wear down. There's some grumpiness in the locker room, and you tend to kind of lose some of the buy-in from guys who thought they were going to play, were told they're going to play, and then now they're not playing. The depth of this team could be your depth of talent could be one of your greatest assets. It could also be the thing that kind of fractures the locker room if you don't handle it correctly. That's not an easy thing to do. And so how they do that is going to go a long way towards determining how good this defense can be. It's a challenge it's almost one of those things where like a lot of people would love to have that problem. Oh, woe is us. You have too many good players. How are you going to use them all? Cry me a frickin' river. Like I was talking to a friend last night, and he was down in Arizona yesterday, and I was like, dude, I don't want. He was like, yeah, it gets a little chilly down here. I was like, dude, shut it. Like, I don't want to hear you talking about how chilly it is when I'm in -5. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can miss me with that, right? It's all about perspective. His version of chilly and my version of chilly. I'm putting on a parka and gloves and a beanie to take the trash out. You know what I'm saying? Like, these are first world problems to have. But that's a reality of where Notre Dame is. They are really deep. How do you keep everybody? You have 13 D tackles on your roster. You have 10, 11 defensive ends. You have 10 linebackers. You have 13, 14 DBs. How are you going to keep them all happy? But also, how are you going to properly take advantage of all their skills in a way that makes sure everybody's in the flow of the game and able to make plays and those type of things? So it's not like they've done a bad job of this. I think they did a decent job of playing their depth last year. But you're even deeper, in my opinion, this year than you were last year.
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, and some of the answers are relatively simple. If this is going to be the team we think that it is, I don't want to see Leonard Moore playing a snap in the second quarter or Rice. I don't want to see Drake Bowen playing midway through the third quarter against Purdue. There's just things that, one, it's less risk. The amount of times that I've seen players get hurt in just, I don't want to call it meaningless snaps, but when the game is well in doubt, the amount of players that I've seen get hurt because it's just, one more drive to see what they can do again. It's like, hey, you don't need it. Then the onus falls on Chris Ash to say, okay, we're still going to call the same defense, but instead of Drake Bowen calling the plays, it's going to be number 19 calling the plays. Hey, we're going to call the same plays, but you know what? Instead of Leonard Moore lining up in the boundary, we got Kari Adams out there. Or we have DJ McKinney lined up out there. We have Jaden Sanders lined up out there. Hey, you don't need
whoever, right?
Right. You don't need a Don Schuler on the field in a 30-point game in the second half against Purdue or against Rice. You just don't. Those are very easy ways to get depth utilized. Don't fall into the habit of, they may or may not be ready. So don't make the mistake that the wide receiver room did and just play Jordan Faison 65 snaps a game. Because if the true goal is to make a run at the national title, you want Leonard Moore to be fresh and not have to rely on that month-long break to be like, okay, now they can finally catch their breath. Mm-hmm. But the depth on this roster is absolutely insane, and one that I'm excited to watch this upcoming season, that's for sure. Brian, let's kind of wrap up this conversation on the defense and talk 3 keys to success. What does this team need to do? What does this unit need to do to live out through all of the things that we've just talked about?
Yep. And we can shoot through these quick because most of these we've kind of touched on already. Number 1, the D-line has to be as good as we think it can be. Defensive line was very good last season. It was good the year before. I believe that just God-given ability standpoint, this is a much more talented and certainly a bigger defensive line than we've seen. Yes, losing Josh Burnham and Jordan Patelho and Junior Telemaka is nothing to sniff at. But, Bryce Young's here. And this isn't just about Keon and the freshmen are better than those. No, it's about you did add Keon Keeley, you did add Ebenezer Utada, you did add Rodney Dunham, but it's also about Boubacar's now a year older and a year removed from his surgery. Bryce is a year older. He's going to be better. So it's also about their development. You look inside. Yes, losing Jared Dawson, Gabriel Rubio, who was injured a lot in his career. Losing Donovan Heinisch, who was a captain for you and a good football player. Again, who was it that made the game-clinching sack at the end of the Georgia game? Who was the guy that made the huge tackle for loss near the goal line when you're down 7-0 to Penn State? It was 2 guys that are now gone. So they were good football players. But you add Tion Gray, you add Francis Brew, Armel Mukum's a year older, Jason Onye's back, you add Tiki Hola, you add Elijah Golden, you might be able to add Chris Burgess inside. Sevillano's a year older, Cole Mullins is a year older, Davion Dixon's a year older. So when you look at it, it's a lot of talent, a lot of depth. It's longer, it's more athletic, it's bigger, it's more explosive. And now you've got a new defensive line coach stepping into the mix at a time when I think this was the perfect timing for it. Not saying that I'm glad Al Washington's not coaching the D-line, but it's more like if you're going to have a change, now's the time for the change to happen because you are having so many new players and new spots. It is the time where a new voice could fit in well if that change is going to happen. And so key number 1, Trev, you have the chance to have an elite defensive line. And if this defense is going to play championship football, that defense has to live up to expectations as a unit.
Couldn't agree more. Could not agree more. And Brian, what do we always say on this channel? Everything lives in the trenches. That's your foundation for offense and defense. And the second key to success is, it kind of just mirrored off of what we just got done talking about. It's continued dominance against the run while improving against the pass. Where does that start, Brian? The defensive line. You brought in guys like Tion Gray. You brought back Armel Mukum. You brought in Francis Brew. You get Jason Onye back. You got big old run stuffers up there in the depths, waiting in the wings to get their opportunity, and you beefed up your edge rushing game. Boubacar's a year older. Bryce is a year older. Keon Keeley is now back in South Bend. Logan Thomas is ideally going to stay healthy. Then when you factor in Utade and Rodney Dunham, both of those areas need to be elevated. And it's going to look different. For the interior, you have to generate more of a pass rush this season. Mm-hmm. As comfortable as I am saying, this is might be the best edge duo coming back in the country. Yep. But you can't just rely on that to generate a pass rush. Who says you can't have all 4 get after the quarterback?
Yeah.
Who says that it's not Boubacar this down and Bryce Young this down and Keon Keeley this down and Francis Brew this down and Jason Onye this down? That's possible. And then against the run, it's a little bit different. Edges have to continue doing better setting the edge in the run game. You brought in a 6'6", 336-pound Mack truck to essentially pave a freeway-sized hole for Drake Bowen and guys like Kingston and Jalen Sneed and Jaden Osbury, Madden for him to come in and clean up.
Mm-hmm.
That has to be elevated this year and maintained in some areas as well.
Yep. Next, Trev, you talk about the pass. I mean, you talk about the D-line and the run defense and the pass rush. It's not even so much to me that I care that the D tackles have a whole lot more sacks. It could also be Tion Gray comes off the line, drives the center 3 yards off the ball as Drake Bowen comes right behind him and, comes free. The interior being effective against the pass is not just them getting sacks. It's also them being disruptive where, Tion or Francis Brew or Armel or Jason Onye takes a guard or a center and just gets him on his heels, forces the quarterback to run out of the pocket right into the waiting arms of Boubacar, Bryce Young, Keon Keeley, Logan Thomas, or whoever. And so that is that. But I think the interior is so important to this, Trev, because you need Notre Dame to, I think, be even better against the run next year with that, like you said, without taking a step back while also improving against the pass. The pass rush is a part of that, but also being more consistent with what you're doing on the perimeter coverage wise is going to help with that as well. I expect there to be improvement because even with all the changes he wants to make, you're going to see more zone this year. And that's okay as long as they know what they're doing and they do it aggressively and soundly and understand it's not just about dropping at a 45-degree angle and working to this spot like it is in the drill. It's about find the curl player, find the end, find the flat, find the route. And early in the year, they weren't doing that. They were just dropping to a spot. As the year went on and they got more comfortable with playing zone, you'd see them start to drop and then find the tight end on the deep out cut and then get underneath them, or they'd find the deep in cut and they'd kind of peel off and get underneath that guy. All of it is look, I don't care as much about yards. When we look at the numbers earlier, Trev, I don't care that they rank 56th in pass defense. I don't. I mean, I think it can be better, but they weren't that bad after the second game. They gave up a ton of yards in game 2. But I can live with that. What I want to see is I want to see you better than 19th in yards per attempt, and I definitely want to see you better than 51st in yards per completion.
And if you focus on those areas, a byproduct of that will be the total passing defense numbers going down, yards per game. But they can't go into it saying, okay, guys, we just have to allow less passing yards a game. How do we do that? You know what I'm saying? So I get you completely. Final key here, Brian, key to success for this defense is getting better situationally. Talking middle 8, third down, red zone. Those are key areas that Notre Dame's defense is going to have to get better at because as good as they were, almost a similar conversation to the offense. They ranked 68th in the country in red zone defense, correct, Brian?
They were 68th in red zone defense, and unlike the offense, which was terrible in overall, but was in 21st in touchdown defense, the defense was 68 in red zone defense, but they were only 47th in red zone touchdown defense. What made them a good scoring defense is they didn't let teams get into the red zone. But once teams got into the red zone, they weren't nearly good enough at keeping them out of the end zone. To further your point, Trevor, Notre Dame last year, 68th in red zone defense, 47th in red zone touchdown defense, but they were first in college football last year in red zone attempts. Now, they would have fallen a little bit if they would have played in the playoffs, but they would have still been top 10.
Sure.
They were, I think, 3rd or 4th going into the postseason, something like that. And so, yes, you were good about not letting teams get into the red zone, but now once you keep doing that, but once they get there, you got to be better than 68th and 47th.
And that's what's so exciting about having this conversation is, yes, they were 68th in red zone defense. They were 10th in the country in points allowed. Imagine if they just weren't 68th.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine if they were 30th.
Yeah.
what would their points per game average gone down to? You know, and those are the conversations. Middle eight, something that they were exceptional in 2024. A big reason why they made a run. The middle eight against Penn State, Notre Dame won that. And then who won the game? The middle eight against Georgia, who won that? The middle eight against Indiana, who won that? But then you go back this year and you look at what Notre Dame did in the middle eight. Against Miami, it was abysmal.
Yeah.
Against Boston College, it was abysmal. It wasn't great against USC either. The middle eight, and it's not even, yes, I understand middle eight is more of a team goal, but the middle eight against Miami and the middle eight against Boston College was just on the defense. That was really, really bad execution on their level, and that's something that's going to have to get better as well.
Yeah, there was a stretch where Miami scored 14 points and Notre Dame had the football on offense for a snap, and they took a knee on that one snap. I mean, like situational football, red zone's got to get better. Third down, they were 35th in the country on third down defense. They were 32nd in the country in fourth down defense. You know, like those have got to get better. They don't match a lot of your other statistics. And as we talked about yesterday, Trev, imagine how good are those terrible numbers? 35th and third down, 32nd and fourth down. No, they're not terrible numbers. They're certainly better than red zone, but it's just one of those things where, you know, where was Indiana on third down defense? They were 8th. Where was Miami on third down defense? They were 11th. Where was Ohio State? They were 10th. You know, I mean, that's kind of where you want to be. Texas A&M did not have a defense as good as Notre Dame's from start to finish, but you know what they're really good at? Getting off the field. They were number one in third down defense. So, yeah, there's definitely room to get better. You know, fourth down defense, same thing. Notre Dame's got to get better on fourth down. They've got to be better than – they gave up 15 fourth down conversions last year. I want to see them get better than that. You know, I want to see them get better than that. So, situational football, Trev, it's got to get better. They were 81st in the country in most fourth down conversions allowed last year because teams went for it a lot more on fourth down. They were 110th in most fourth down attempts. That's actually a good thing. I mean, if teams are attempting that many fourth downs on you, it's because you're winning a lot of games. But that's not the only time that they were giving up fourth downs. Miami went 2 for 3. A&M went 1 for 1. You gave up 3 fourth downs on 4 fourth down attempts in the games that you lost. It's got to get better. I mean, you've got to get better. So, as we talk about it, Trev, situational football look, turning the ball over a ton last year was very good for this defense. It allowed them to kind of, you know, kill a lot of drives. The fact that you were as disruptive as you were once you let the defense loose is a big reason why you were so successful last year. Now you've got to improve in those other areas. That's the difference in you being a really good defense. Well, I think we can all agree that this was a pretty good defense last year on the whole. On the whole, this was a top 10 to 12, 15 caliber defense on the whole. And that's the low end. I mean, you could argue top 7. I mean, there's, you know, like I said, FEI had him 6th. FPI had him 7th. What I'm saying is just the floor is top 12 to 15. We agree on that? That's pretty good.
Absolutely.
But 12 to 15 or even 6 to 7 is not good enough when you should have been 2nd or 3rd or 4th. And if you want to get to that point, then that's right there where you improve without sacrificing other things. Be better on third down. And honestly, probably it's like get better on third and long. I mean, they were terrible on third and long last year. It was frustrating. And then obviously get better in the red zone. Even if your overall red zone percentage doesn't get better, but your red zone touchdown percentage gets way better, that's good enough for me. Like if they rank 68th on the red zone next year with the same number of attempts, which means because you're not getting to the red zone very often, you rank 68th because when they get there, they're making those field goals, but you're, 15th in red zone touchdown defense, you're going to be an elite defense. Elite defense.
Has to improve. And I'm with you. But those are the 3 keys, big picture, that this team will have to improve on, this defense will have to improve on. And we're going to continue diving into the how behind that as the offseason continues to progress. But, folks, that is going to do it for part 3 of today's show. Don't go anywhere. We're wrapping everything up today with a mailbag. But before we get there, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell. Share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame college football as much as you do. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Brian, in the final part of the show today on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel, we got a mailbag to take us home. And of course, if this is your first mailbag, you can always put MB for mailbag, or you can put a little mailbox emoji. That lets us know to set that question aside. We obviously can't go forever, so if you want to make sure that you get your question answered, you can always feel free to throw in a super chat as well. From Pete Weber, what are the main issues that prevent Dan Lanning from maximizing the talent on the Oregon roster?
Great question. Number one is I don't think his team is always mentally prepared for the biggest stages. You watch him play against Washington in 23. You watch him play against Ohio State in the playoffs last year. You look at him this year in the playoffs. I mean, I would even argue even against Texas Tech. I don't know that was like Oregon played well. That was as much about Texas Tech just being in over their head as it was Oregon. You know what I mean? And then, of course, they go out there and they just looked like a team that had never played in a big game before. Like JMU looked more mentally ready to play against Oregon than Oregon looked against Indiana. They're just putting the ball on the ground. The second best player in college football coming back next year, according to On3, was just putting the ball on the ground every time he got hit. I mean, it was terrible. Throws a pick six on first, second play of the game. You know, and they're just not mentally ready in those big moments. That's really a big problem. And look, I think Tosh is a great recruiter, and I think he's kids play hard for him, but I don't know that I'd say he's the best X's and O's defensive coordinator on the planet. I think there's an area to improve there. So but I think it really, a lot of it, Trev, to me just comes down to your mental ability to just be locked in and be ready for the moment. I still can't get over watching that game last year between Ohio State and Oregon and just thinking to myself, like, does Oregon even want to be here? Like, do they even do they think there's this is like a warm-up game or something like that? They just looked just absolutely out of their element. This after they had beaten Penn State in the Big Ten title game. Well, they won the Big Ten title. Yeah, they beat a guy who's actually worse in big games than what Dan Lanning has been.
Yeah. For Oregon, what I whittle it down to, Pete, and this is a very brief answer, I guess you could say, but intensity and talent can only get you so far. You do have to have a level of, and I know we just got done talking about the defense and like, hey, sometimes the answer is just let your athletes go be athletes. And that's true to an extent, but you can't sacrifice putting your athletes in a position to succeed for just raw intensity. That's something that I'll give Dan Lanning. He brings that to the table every single week, whether they're playing Maryland or Penn State in the Big Ten championship game. But you can't just have that. You can't just give a spunky halftime interview and then just expect, hey, we just have better athletes, go out and be dudes. That can't be. Now, do I know if for a fact if that's what he's saying? No, but I watched the games. I watched what happened against Indiana. I watched what happened against Ohio State last year. I watched what happened against Indiana in the regular season. And that's the biggest thing. I don't think it's a softness thing. I've heard that floated around. Look, I can't say that Oregon showed me something in the month of November, battling it out against Iowa on the road, beating Washington on the road, beating USC at home. But then the second they lose a big game, so, team's soft. We knew it. They've been soft all along. That's not the case. It's just
beating Ohio State in the regular season last year.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. That's not soft. It's just Dan Lanning has to do a better job of channeling some of just the raw intensity that he has into putting his players in a better position to succeed. That's my takeaway with Dan.
I just think sometimes coaches who are emotional can struggle to get their players to not be emotional in big moments. I've used this example of Shane Beamer. There is no more And Dan Lanning is nowhere as bad as Shane Beamer. Shane Beamer is, and I'm trying to think of the right way to say this, the most emotional coach in the country, and I don't mean that in the positive. He constantly loses his cool. I've talked to recruits that have attended practices, and they're like, it's utter chaos at practice. And you're like, yeah, that tracks, because that's just kind of like Shane Beamer's overall DNA. And then you even just watching it live. I mean, I was there watching him lose his mind on the sidelines against Notre Dame, and his team just played like that all game. Watching Brett Bielema just basically kind of, it looked like the scene from A Few Good Men. You know what I mean? Where Jack Nicholson goes off and Jack Nicholson. I got it right. I always get those two confused. Just like loses his mind and forgets where he is for a second. Rip off your head. You know what I mean? And that's Shane Beamer having to be held back by other coaches because he's yelling at Brett Bielema while there's an injured player on the ground. Like, dude, what is wrong with you? Like, are you serious? And then you're shocked that your football team constantly does things like they do. Blow leads. He had a 30-3 lead against Texas A&M and lost. Like, that's his problem. And until he curtails that and matures as a coach, his team will always be that way. And that's kind of my thing with Dan Lanning. Like, you still are a head coach that still acts like a coordinator. And it works to a degree, but if you want to get over that hump, you've got to be able to kind of curtail that a little bit. And I think Marcus Freeman, overcorrected on that early in his career. I think he understood, like, I can't be the same fiery guy that I am. There's got to be a time and a place for that. And you see Marcus get fired up, but it's a different type of energy. There's a control to his intensity that we see at practice. And then in games, he lets loose a little bit more, but like he overcorrected earlier on in that he was too calm. And it's like that worked for Jim Tressel because that's Jim Tressel's personality. You're not that way. Be yourself. And then he understands now better, when do I got to be calm? And then when do I got to, let that intensity out? And I think Dan Lanning, to a degree, is still finding that. But we're talking about finding that in the college football playoffs. One year is the number 1 seed, and the next year in the semifinals, right? Like, he's not some bum. He's doing a good job. It's about what can he do to get to that next level. I think that's a big part of it right there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good question.
From Play Like a Champ, how surprising is it that there were 0 transfers out of the O-line room? Is this an encouraging sign after Rudolph lost guys they would have helped or they would have liked to keep in previous seasons?
Well, I mean, transfer-wise, sure, but I think you could maybe make the argument that a guy or two went to the NFL that maybe you would have liked to have kept, at least one, but I'm shocked just because 20 is that's just too many guys. And nobody left. I'm like, yeah, it's a great sign. I mean, if they're all staying because they want to be part of that group, then great. I mean, I'm sure there's some that are staying they want to get their degree. And that's not a shot at Joe Rudolph. That's happened since Notre Dame, since I've been alive. Kids that maybe otherwise would transfer stick around because they want to get that degree. But yeah, I'm shocked, and it's a good sign. I mean, I was like, who are they going to lose? And they kept everybody. So the battles this spring are going to be pretty fierce.
Yeah, it's wild to think that they can put together a complete 4 deep. Well,
yeah,
that's wild.
Yeah,
that is crazy.
Yeah. Somebody used a word, unhinged.
Yeah.
I think that's a good word to describe Shane Beamer when he gets going at times, and that's not good. That's not a good thing. There's intensity, and then there is a lack of self-control.
Yeah.
And I think the issue that Shane has is Coach Beamer has he has a lack of self-control at times and a lack of emotional discipline.
Yeah. From Joseph Parr, do you think that either Bubba Frazier or Braden Robinson could be Malachi Toney and how dangerous they are with the ball and force themselves on the field next year?
Yeah, it's possible. I mean, they're similar skill sets. I don't think either one of them is as good as Malachi Toney was coming out of high school. I mean, Malachi Toney is not some guy that just like came out of nowhere. I mean, he was a guy that they were pretty excited about at Miami. I'm looking at what his ranking was, but Miami was pretty fired up about him coming out of high school. On3 had him as a 3-star recruit, the number 80 wide receiver in the country. Good call on that one, guys. But you started hearing about him in the spring at Miami. Like, he's legit. But as far as style of play, they absolutely can bring that to the table. No question. Especially Bubba. I think Braden is interesting because Braden Robinson is more of a traditional receiver trapped in a gadget player's body. He likes to run routes, dig routes, post corner. I mean, like, if he was 6'1", he's a 5-star receiver, in my opinion. I mean, he's legit. He's just 5'6", 5'7". I mean, he's just not real big. He can still do those things, but he does the other things. I think with Bubba Frazier, Bubba has a lot of that. Run him on jet sweeps, reverses, screens, things like that. Absolutely. I think he brings that to the table. Is he as dynamic as Malachi? I mean, that's saying a lot. Malachi was a special player this year, but can he add that skill set to the table? Absolutely, he can add that skill set.
Skill set, absolutely. Do I think either of them could be? Absolutely. Do I think it'll be this year? I don't. Like, Malachi Toney was so ahead of. I mean, he reclassified. He should have been a senior in high school, and he was playing in the national championship game. Yeah. So just as far as their development goes, it's just different. And that's not a shot at Bubba Frazier or Braden Robinson. Malachi Toney was arguably the best true freshman in all of college football this past season.
I mean, I don't know who you'd put ahead of him. Yeah,
exactly. And so it's different. I think at some point they can probably Bubba closer to Braden as things stand today. It's just, body size are a little different, but play style wise, it's very, very similar.
Yeah. You guys are coming with great questions today so far.
From Chief Brody, CJ 2026 or Jimmy 2009, who will end up with the better season?
I think it'll end up being CJ, but a part of that is CJ won't have to carry the team in the same way that Jimmy did. I mean, it was Jimmy at the very beginning. It was Jimmy, Golden, and Michael Floyd, and Kyle Rudolph. And that was a great foursome. But the O-line wasn't very good. The defense was terrible. The run game was awful. I mean, it was like if Jimmy didn't play great, they were going to lose. And sometimes, Trev, Jimmy played great and they still lost.
Yeah.
There was a game where I think it was it? I'm going to look it up real quick. It was either Navy or UConn where Jimmy threw for 400 yards and they lost. So I'm trying to pull up his 2009 season because it was really impressive. But like, they lost to Michigan 38-34. Jimmy went 25 of 42 for 336 yards, 3 touchdowns, and no picks, and they lost.
Yeah, it's like same thing with Stanford at the end of the year. He went 23 of 30 for 340 yards, 5 touchdowns, no picks.
Yep. Against USC, he went 24 of 43, 260 yards, 2 touchdowns. He had three total touchdowns, no interceptions, and they lost 34-27. Against Navy, he goes 37 of 51, 72.1% completion percentage, 452 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick, and the pick hit Michael Floyd on the back of his jersey because he thought he did the wrong thing. Jimmy threw him a fade. It hit Michael in the back, and they picked it off. I believe that was the interception he threw in that game, and they lost. Against Pitt, he goes 283 yards, accounts for 2 touchdowns, and they lose. UConn in overtime, he goes 30 of 45, 329 yards, accounts for 3 touchdowns, no picks, and they lose. I mean, if CJ Carr puts up the numbers that Jimmy Clausen did, they're not only going to go 12-0, they won't play a game within 14 to 17 points if he puts up numbers like that. Why? Because the supporting cast is so much better. Way better offensive line. Way better defense. And then also for part of that season, it was just Golden Tate because Kyle Rudolph was banged up. Michael Floyd got hurt in the 3rd game, didn't come back till later in the year. So I think CJ will have the better season, but I think part of that is CJ will never be asked to carry the team the way that Jimmy was. Now he'll be asked to have some big moments like Jimmy had, throwing coming off the bench against Purdue because he was hurt. He wasn't supposed to play. He has to come off the bench and play anyway, or they're going to lose to Purdue. throws that touchdown pass to Kyle Rudolph at the end of the game. I mean, they're going to need CJ probably to do that at some point in time, but there won't be that same pressure on CJ to, dude, if you don't play well, we got no chance, like there was on Jimmy in 2009.
I'll tell you what, if he repeats that stat line, that FanDuel prediction for him to win the Heisman Trophy is going to look mighty fine.
Mm-hmm.
That is for sure.
Oh, yeah. If he throws for 3,700 yards and accounts for 31 touchdowns and only throws 4 picks in the regular season, yeah, complete 68% of his passes, there's no doubt. He'll have a great year. But you want to put into context how good CJ was this year? Jimmy Clausen that year had tied the Notre Dame record for quarterback rating with 161.4. He completed 68% of his passes, 3,722 yards, 28 touchdowns, 4 picks. He averaged 8.8 yards per attempt. Jimmy Clausen or CJ Carr this year was over 168 in quarterback rating and averaged 9.4 yards per pass attempt. And he wasn't throwing to Golden Tate, Michael Floyd, and Kyle Rudolph all year.
Correct.
Now, Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison are not slouches, but let's be real, they're not Michael Floyd and Golden Tate. I mean, Golden Tate won a Biletnikoff that year. And that was a lethal duo when they together and talking about Floyd and Tate.
Yeah.
And my guy Tim O'Malley and I are always arguing who's better. He thinks Golden's better. I say Floyd was better. You know, like we're always having that fun debate. But the point is, they were studs. I mean, the Michigan game was unbelievable. And they were just toying with Michigan's defensive players in that game.
Yeah. I mean, Jimmy Clausen in 2009 was exceptional. It's just his supporting cast around him minus his banged up pass catchers were kind of anything but exceptional.
Mm-hmm. That defense was so bad. So bad. They give up over 30 points. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times that year. And the times they didn't give up that, they gave up 21. Let me see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 times. They also gave up 27 in a loss, 23 in a loss, 21 in a win, 30 in a win. It was terrible. Absolutely terrible. And his numbers would have been better if, like I said, Trev, he had to come off the bench against Purdue. Because remember, I think Dane started that game. And
I think Jimmy started, but they rotated. Yeah.
And then he was out for a while, and then they brought him back in at the end.
Yeah.
To win the game. And he couldn't move. He couldn't move. Like, he played that season on one foot, basically. Just to put into context, most underappreciated Notre Dame quarterback of my lifetime is Jimmy Clausen. He was very good. Unfortunately, he came in with all the pomp and circumstance and the attitude that people thought he had. And I just don't think Jimmy had great social skills because I think he'd been kind of how he was raised to be this, quarterback. He had 2 older brothers that were D1 quarterbacks. And I think Jimmy was always kind of groomed to be that. And I just don't think he was allowed to, grow up and just be a kid. You know what I mean? There was all the little LeBron James of high school football and all this other kind of stuff, but he was never going to live up to that. He couldn't. It's like Ron Paulus. There was no way Ron Paulus could have lived up to the type unless he won 2 Heismans. I mean, like literally, that's the only way he could have lived up to the hype. Same thing with Jimmy. And I think a lot of Notre Dame fans have negative memories of him because of that and because of, the fact that they weren't good, but they weren't not good because of Jimmy Clausen. Like, agreed. That's the only reason they even won the games they won.
Yeah.
Is because of that.
Yep.
So, yeah, it's frustrating to remember. But anyway, let's get to the next question. That was a good one, Chief.
From Trev's Buy-Sell Hold Glasses. For all the depth across the defense, how do you limit attrition of the younger players, especially if there's a revenue cap for players?
Buy-in. And the best way to buy in is to make sure that players understand what their role is, that there's honest communication, and that the players believe that you're invested in them. What you'll find is sometimes players may not get the playing time that they think that they should get, but if they still believe in you and they still believe that you're invested in them and you've been honest about things, don't tell them You're going to play every week. You're going to play every week, and then they never play. If you tell them they're going to play, you play them. And if you're not going to play them, hey, listen, right now, this is where we're at. Stay ready, but this is where we're at. And make sure that the vision is still laid out for them. I wish more coaches understood that players just want you to be honest with them. That's what they want, especially players at Notre Dame. Be honest with them and make sure that they understand the vision. Because with the talent that Notre Dame has, Joey O'Brien's not going to be like a bad locker room guy because he's not playing as much as maybe a freshman, sophomore, somewhere else, because he's going to look out on the field and be like, that number 9's pretty good. That number 8's pretty good. Just like Tay didn't leave when he was sitting behind as a freshman watching Adon and arguably the greatest safety to ever play at Notre Dame play. He got it, and he learned from him. He was a sponge. He was like, hey, I want to learn. And then he applied that the next year. As long as there's honest communication and good leadership amongst the veterans, then the younger players will, for the most part, be happy, just like we saw this year. Even some of the younger players they lost, they didn't lose Jadon Blair because Jadon was unhappy. They lost Jadon Blair because they didn't want him anymore. Now, we could argue how dumb that was as a decision, but if Jadon Blair if they wanted him to stay this year, he would have stayed. So, like, there was, like, not very little attrition from guys that they wanted to stay. And some of them were like, you kind of understood it. Like, yeah, you get it.
Yeah, it's just having a plan. And some of the younger players before in the past that we've seen leave that had promising futures, there was just no plan with them. It's, we're going to try you out here, and then we'll try you out here, and we'll move you inside, and let's move you back outside. Hey, let's make you a linebacker. Let's make you a DN. Let's make you a hybrid. So it's about having a plan and good communication.
Yep.
From Mr. Sergeant Steve Irish, thank you, Coach Brian and Trev and everyone for your prayers, support, and words of encouragement.
You're welcome, buddy. And we appreciate you for your service to our country, and we know that you're going to keep battling, and we're glad that we're here for you as you get through these tough times, brother. We are. And then we got another one from Sergeant Steve right here. That's a football question.
He said, oops. Also, my question for you, Coach Brian and Trev, is about Kedron Young. Is there any current info you can share about how he's doing and if he's going to be ready for this season? God bless and go Irish.
I mean, look, we don't like to comment on injuries because a lot of the information you get, because coaches aren't going to talk about it really, and the media people aren't going to talk about it. They're going to say, Freeman will address it when we get to the spring, et cetera, et cetera. And you get things from sources, and then you go repeat those things. Like I remember when Gerby Lambert got hurt, was it last spring? And we were told it was a knee. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to hold off on it till we get official word from Notre Dame. And we did, and found out that was wise because it was a shoulder. It wasn't a knee. We'd have looked dumb. There was somebody who told me, hey, man, Audric Estime is going to not play in this game. I'm like, all right, cool, whatever. And I didn't report it, and he went out and played and rushed for 100 yards that week. I remember before the Georgia Tech game in 2024, there were other outlets reporting that Jeremiah Love was questionable and might not play. And I'm like, oh, I mean, I'm sitting here in the press box looking right at him, and he looks fine to me. So I didn't report it. Notre Dame didn't comment on it, and he went out and played. So I found it's best not to talk about injuries unless we get official word from Notre Dame. I found people have gotten burned way too many times, and I've gotten burned before in the past on that. So I honestly don't know. I have not heard that there are any setbacks, and that's really the big thing with a guy like Kedron is, are there any setbacks? And I have not heard that there are any setbacks. He got injured in August, which means he should be in the spring close to the point where he can start coming back and working out, doing some team stuff. How will they have him out there getting tackled? I hope not. But he'll be going through things and working out, and I would imagine based on normal timelines, because you're now going to be 7-8 months removed from 6 to 8 months removed from the surgery, which is usually the time frame to come back from an ACL. But we probably won't see Kedron 100% until the fall, just based on timelines. So, but I barring a setback, I expect him to be ready for the season.
From Trev's Buy Sell Hold Glasses, it's worth noting that Brian Kelly is still unemployed. However, he's linked to some Big Ten schools. What are your thoughts on his return to coaching?
Linked in what regard? As like an analyst or something? I mean, there's no open jobs right now. So would he be coming back as an analyst, a coordinator, something like that? Like, I haven't heard Brian Kelly's name at all. I also haven't searched it out.
Yeah, there's a 0% chance he returns to coaching at the college level as like a coordinator. Not a chance.
It's like an analyst for a year where he's just kind of helping some young coach in the back office or something like that as like a guidance or whatever. But I think Brian Kelly will coach again, but I think right now Brian Kelly's going to sit back and soak up all that money LSU paid him and do some TV gigs probably and try to rebuild his reputation and try to get back into coaching. But if a team was smart, his coaching days at the college level are done. If a team is smart.
Yeah. From Chief Brody, if this defense can get pressure with 4, will it be the best defense in Notre Dame history? What does D-line pressure hinge on? Seems like it was poor early on last year, and they turned it on after A&M.
Well, I don't think the defensive line pressure was a problem. I think the defensive scheme was a problem, and I've said this over and over and over and over again. There was a snap against Purdue. Trev, you know what play I'm talking about because I sent you the snap. Where Boubacar Traore comes off the line and spins inside of the Purdue tackle. And, I mean, that is a sack. And he doesn't get within 4 feet of the quarterback because the ball is out so fast because they were playing off coverage of their corners. Just catches it, gets the ball out. So fans will say, oh, no pressure on the quarterback. I'm like, there's literally no way you could have got – if you'd have had a linebacker blitz up the middle in the A-gap untouched, that ball's coming out still because you're just playing off coverage. So it was once they got aggressive and they took away the easy access throws, which are just catch and throws, that's when quarterbacks were forced to hold on to the ball longer, and that's when the pressure could get there. And they weren't letting them loose either early in the season. Also, they were saying, hey, contain gaps, and you've got to control this lane and that lane, and they weren't letting them go. And then eventually they said, okay, we're going to turn them loose, and we're going to go after them, and we're going to do some zone fires, and we're going to do some sim pressures, and we're going to bring some overload from a side or overload period. With you mix it up, and they were unstoppable, basically. And that's why they led the nation in pressure. So I still don't think it was a D-line problem. Not a lot of teams can consistently get pressure with 4 against good offensive lines. It just rarely happens.
Yeah, I mean, even Miami had to start bringing some additional pressure against Indiana, and that was with guys like, Reuben Bain and Akeem Mesidor and Justin Scott and Ahmad Motens, so yeah. I get you.
Mm-hmm.
But the best defense in Notre Dame history, I don't know if I could coin it as that.
I mean, you'd have to say maybe best defense in the last 30, 40 years. But, I'll say this again. 1966 defense gave up 3.8 points per game. I mean, that year they gave up you gave up 14 points to number 7 Purdue, who had Bob Greasy at quarterback. You go up 10 points to number 2 Michigan State. They had 6 shutouts, 2 games where they held opponents to 7 points, and then 2 teams got to 10 points. Michigan State, number 2, got to 10. Number 7, Purdue, got to 14. They beat number 10 Oklahoma on the road 38-0 in the last game of the year. And Purdue finished the year, by the way, ranked number 7. Yeah. The only teams that Purdue lost to that year were Notre Dame and Michigan State, who ranked number 2. So you look at it, Trev. I mean, Oklahoma that year finished, USC finished 18th. Oklahoma ended up falling out of the top 25. They were top 10 at the time. They lost by 3 to Colorado, 3 to Missouri, and 1 to Oklahoma State. They beat number 4 Nebraska. They beat Texas by 9. Notre Dame beat them 38-0 in Norman. And then they beat number 10 USC, who finished the year 18th after getting blasted by Notre Dame, and then went to the bowl game and lost to Purdue by a point. Notre Dame beat them 51-0 in that game. Their other 3 losses, USC that year, they lost by 3 points at Miami. They lost by 7 points at number 8 UCLA, and they lost by 1 point in the Rose Bowl to number 7 Purdue. Notre Dame beat them 51-0. So you have to talk about like more of a modern record, and now it's like, okay, are they as good as 1988? Are they as good as 2012? Start getting into some of those conversations, then I think this team has a chance to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do. But it's unfair, and the era was different. I mean, they held teams at 3.8 points per game, Trev, and didn't lead the nation in scoring defense. You know what I mean? It was a different era.
The offensive game is so different. Like the best defenses in the country year in and year out in the modern era don't shut teams out. Like shutouts are just insane, especially with how offenses is played now. So yeah, I get you.
Just and that year that team also led the nation in scoring offense, by the way, at 36.2 points per game. You talk about how much different the game is. Notre Dame in 1966 led the nation in offense at 36.2. That would rank them 13th in the country this year. It's just a different era. But of the modern era, which I would kind of consider like maybe late 70s on, maybe 80s on, it has a chance to be as good as 88. It's got some work to do to be as good as 88, right? I'm not saying it's going to be, but am I going to just dismiss it out of hand? Can it be as good as 20? I think it better be better than 2012. As great as the 2012 offense was, they didn't really play anybody that year that was good on offense outside of Oklahoma, and they were a little overrated offensively. They were a good team, but they weren't like this juggernaut offense with like Landry Jones and what was it, Blake Bell? What did they call him? What was the nickname? Like the brain or something like that. They'd bring in the quarterback who would run the ball, and I forget what they called him. Somebody in the chat's going to know. But like this defense should be better than that one. Secondary alone, because now that defense maybe is a little bit different if Jamor Slaughter doesn't get hurt against Michigan in like game 2. I mean, they had some injuries that year as well, but this they have a chance to be as good as the 88, 89 defenses. Yeah.
They called him the Belldozer.
Yeah. Scopex in the chat said thank you for that. Appreciate that. But it's in his. We've got to kind of get out of the mindset when it comes to defensive statistics about best ever, because eras are just so much different. I mean, Notre Dame had teams that scored 100 some points in games back in the 1900s, early 1900s, because they were playing like
fire departments,
medical school, right? Fire departments, like flight schools and stuff like that. Like, it's just like high schools. They're playing high schools at times. It was just a very different era. They beat St. Viator in 1912, 116-7. That team played 3 games that year. That's now considered the University of Charleston, which is a Division II team. They played Adrian College that year, which was a Division II team. St. Viator, played 8 games. They played Notre Dame. They played Grand Prairie Seminary. They played Chicago Veterinary. They played Christian Brothers High School. They played the St. Viator alums, literally. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, it was just so much different back then. And then when they played like real teams, they played Wabash. Like, what's funny is in 1912, Notre Dame played 7 games, and 2 of the games they played against, I've coached against those teams, Wabash and Adrian, because they're D3 teams now. Like, it was a very different era. They coached against Ohio Northern in 1913. They coached against Alma in 1913. I coached against Alma. South Dakota they beat. They played Christian Brothers High School in Missouri, out of Missouri. Actually it was Christian Brothers College, but which no longer is a thing. But it's so much different. They in 1914 they played Rose Polytechnic and beat them 103-0. The next week they lost to Yale 28-0. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so much, and I played against Rose. It's now called Rose Holman. Trev, I'm sure you've heard of it. It's Rose, but like, I've coached against them. They're D3 teams, high schools. They They played against flight schools, stuff like that. It's such a different era than what it used to be, that it's just impossible to compare things to all time history. You want to try to keep it into somewhat of this is your era. They lost to Michigan Agriculture in 1910, which I believe that's not Michigan State. I thought that might have been the team that became Michigan State, but it's not. So yeah, it's just a different time, different era. But it has a chance to be one of the best of the last 40, 50 years. I'm not saying it will be. A chance. They played the Chicago Physicians and Surgeons in 1908. Literally, it's the name of it. They won 88-0. You look at the schedules back then. They beat them 32-0 the year before. Apparently, the Chicago Physicians and Surgeons weren't as good in 1907 as they were in 1906.
Hey, 1906. That was a smash mouth ball club there, man.
Yeah, 1906. They beat them again in 1905. They played North Division High School to kick off the 1905 season. They played American Medical, beat them 142-0. They played Bennett Medical, beat them 22-0. They're playing a bunch of doctors. You know what I mean? So it's just a different deal, man. It's a different deal. So, yeah. Somebody asked, what years were you at Witt and Duquesne? I was at Wittenberg in 01, and I was at Duquesne in 03. And then his name's Seven Mules. Ironically, I was at a school in 02, Muhlenberg, which our nickname was the Mules. So, yeah. Somebody said, talk about cupcakes. Facts. I mean, you know what I mean? Like, yeah.
I was about to say, we're putting
kids.
it out there in the ether. IU might have a new replacement for Notre Dame in 2029 or whenever they're supposed to play.
Yeah. I mean, is it that far off from who them and Texas Tech are playing next year? No. So, yeah.
No.
Yeah, and Seven Mules is a Wabash alum. I coached against Wabash in 01 when Chris Creighton was their head coach, who's now the Eastern Michigan head coach. So they were pretty good that year. We beat them 14-3. They were very good. Very good. Somebody said that is Michigan State. It's just that Michigan Agriculture is Michigan State.
From Play Like a Champ, if you made your own top 100 players list, which Notre Dame players would be in contention to be on it?
Well, all the guys that were in it, CJ Carr, Anthony Knapp,
Leonard Moore.
Obviously Leonard Moore. See, I forgot Leonard Moore too, apparently. Boubacar and Kingston would all be in there. But, it's also Gerby Lambert. I would consider Drake Bowen for sure. Tay Johnson and Don Schuler would all be in the conversation for me.
Yeah.
I wouldn't put Jordan Faison in the top 100, but he's definitely in the top 200.
Yeah.
They left him out of the top 300. I think Francis Brew would not be in it for me now, but I won't be surprised if going into next year he's in the conversation to be in that list. But those would be the guys that I would have in there.
From Justin ND Sniper, how will the portal additions at D-tackle and defensive back influence defensive game plans next season from a matchup standpoint? In other words, how can they use the additions to exploit other teams' weaknesses?
Well, I think what they can do, Trev, is they better match up now against teams that want to go play bully ball. Like they're able to kind of put more beef on the field if they need to. You want to come play power football, we can eat up 3-4 blockers with 2 guys. They're stronger now at the point of attack than they were a year ago. Francis Brew is not big, but he is incredibly strong, and he plays that way. Tion Gray is big and hard to move. Jason Onye has gotten bigger and stronger every year. He's turned out to be a hard player to move off the ball. So I think that's the big thing, is it allows them to play big boy football a little bit more. They can line up in some odd fronts if they want to kick, Francis Brew out, or they want to kick Elijah Hughes out, or even Jason Onye out. I mean, he could play some 4-eye or some 5 technique and then bump Boubacar out and let him, do some different looks that way and run some zones, pressures out of that. It just gives you more flexibility for how you want to line up. It allows you to play, because now you have a nose that you can legit put over the ball and say, eat up space and occupy double team. So I think it gives them a lot more flexibility, that if they want to play big, they can play big. They couldn't do that as much last year. And once Rubio went out, They had no chance of doing that last year. Now they can, and when I mean play big, it's not just about having big guys, because I think you can play big with Francis Brew on the field because he's so strong. But yeah, I think it just gives you more versatility, and you can better match up against other teams and occupy blockers now more with your line when you want to, but you also still have the ability to attack and penetrate and get after it as well.
Yeah, agreed. And then with the defensive backfield, like let's just say they come across a team like Texas Tech in the postseason, who this past season had like 3 receivers that were 6'3" or taller and had like a 6'5", 6'6" tight end or something. In the defensive backfield, you have a safety that's 6'5", a safety that's 6'4", a safety that's in between 6'2" and 6'3". You have 2 corners that are 6'2". It just gives you the opportunity, to Brian's point, to be able to match up better. It gives you more answers than just, okay, well, these are our guys and this is what we have to roll with. So another one from Sergeant Steve. Is it possible that Mike Denbrock will feel more aggressive about opening up the pass game with more weapons for this upcoming season? And can this help improve wide receiver recruiting at the high school level?
I don't think that Mike Denbrock was unwilling to open up the pass game last year. I think he did open up the pass game last year. That's why Notre Dame ranked in the top 5 in yards per attempt. It's why they ranked let me pull up the stats from yesterday, Trev. I think I still have those cards. It's why last year they ranked, let's see here. The offense last year ranked 5th in 30 plays of 30 yards or more. They ranked 2nd in passing yards per attempt, 8th in passing yards per completion. They ranked 4th in quarterback rating. And they doubled up their plays of 30 yards or more from what they did the year before, despite playing 4 fewer games. I think what we didn't see as much last year was we still didn't see as much of the volume because you had Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. So I think it was more about not willing to be more aggressive, but it's kind of like we're still going to build around those 2 dudes. 4 and 24 are still our dudes. We're still going to do there. And I also think that Mike Denbrock saw in the first 2 games, when we play better defenses, we still have trouble protecting the quarterback. And, I think that factored into it as well. But I think that it's going to be more so. And I obviously the receiving core he had last year was pretty good. I think once Jaden Greathouse went down, I think you did see a little bit of a shift in how teams defended Notre Dame. They played Malachi more. They were more willing to say, you're going to have to beat us with Will Pauling than Malachi Fields, Jeremiah Love, or Jadarian Price. But I don't think it was a lack of willingness to throw down the field. I think it was just properly building around who still is your best players. The key this year, it's not going to so much be the weapons that are going to determine how good Notre Dame is throwing the football this year. It's going to be, can they protect it? Can you protect the quarterback when it matters? That's still going to be the biggest question for me, is against the best teams on your schedule, can you protect your quarterback? If you do that, then they're gonna be great. And to answer your question, Steve, that would then make it even easier to recruit receivers.
Yeah. Same page. From Trev's buy, sell, hold glasses. For those of you who consider as stars on the defense, if you had to give each one nicknames, what would they be? I like Lockdown Moore, for example.
I'm not good with nicknames. The only nickname I've come up with that was good, I did by accident, and that was Freaky Hola.
Yeah.
And that was just
Freaky Hola's spectacular.
That was not even on purpose. It was a total accident. So, I mean, I think other, like, what is, so Drake Bowen, Boubacar, Tay Johnson? I have no idea. I'm just not good at nicknames. Trev, do you got anything? You're young, you're hip. But you don't have your glasses on, so your creative juices aren't flowing quite as strong.
I'm mortal today. My buy, sell, hold glasses are not on. I got nothing. I mean, Lockdown Moore is great. I mean, because I keep thinking, I go to like what their names are, but now you just kind of have to come up with more nicknames for who they are, not what their names are. I like Lockdown Moore. I got nothing. I'm gonna continue to call Theo and Gray a Mack truck, but I don't. That's about it. That's all I got.
Sorry, man. We're just not creative enough for that. We apologize.
I'll wear my glasses tomorrow. If you ask it again tomorrow, I might come up with something.
There you go. Tomorrow mailbag. Yeah, maybe.
Ah.
Maybe. Be good.
From Jason Rose, who are some of the new coaches that have made the best coordinator hires in your opinion?
Some of the new coaches. Let me pull up the list of new college football coaches for 2026. So let's see here. You've got James Franklin. I got to see who did they hire? I know they hired Brent Pry as their defensive coordinator. I said this before. I think that was a good move. I'm shocked that it's the way that they went, because you just don't see a guy who, like, I can't ever think of a situation where a guy that just got fired as the head coach stayed on to be the defensive coordinator. Like, I've never seen that before. I don't know who his offensive coordinator is going to be at Virginia Tech. Do you know who that is? Like, their roster does not list anybody. So I'm not quite sure. It was Philip Montgomery. I don't know if he'll still be that guy. So I'm not quite sure who that's going to be. Let me see here. Yeah, I'm looking. I mean, there's sources of who it is, but I don't know that they've hired anybody yet. So I'm not sure about him. Like we said this the other day, you're going to have to give us a chance to kind of let the season get over and let all the hires be made, and to really study the rosters and kind of have an idea. But I'm trying to think. I know I did like Pat Fitzgerald hiring Max Bull as his co-coordinator on defense with Joe Rossi. I think that was a very smart move. I like Joe Rossi a lot. Keeping him made a lot of sense, and then bringing Max Bull on to kind of groom as a defensive coordinator, I thought made a lot of sense. I thought that was a very strong hire. I'm a big Joe Rossi fan. I think he had some struggles in Michigan State because of issues that were beyond his control, but I think he did good. I think here's one I like, Trev. We talked about this. I did like, it's Jay Hill, right? Who Kyle Whittingham hired as the new offensive coordinator at Michigan. Defensive coordinator.
Defensive. Yep.
Yeah, I thought that was a strong hire. And then he also brought in his offensive coordinator, Jason Beck, who was the offensive coordinator this past year, who was the offensive coordinator with Devin Dampier. Utah went from very bad to really good on offense. So I think Kyle Whittingham made two very strong coordinator hires, which are very important. So that is one coach that I can definitively say, hey, I think he did a good job. I think I didn't love the job Buster Faulkner did this year at Georgia Tech, but I still think overall Buster Faulkner did a pretty darn good job at Georgia Tech. And he's going to have a very talented team around. They went and got Eric Singleton back, so he's going to get to coach him again. He brought Aaron Philo. He brought over. So Florida's going to have some Jaden Ball staying, which I thought was huge to get him to stay for Florida this year. So I do like the Buster Faulkner hire, Trev. I don't know if you still like that one, but I did like that hire for them as offensive coordinator.
Yeah, that one was decent. It's going to depend on how they manage Aaron Philo. He has a different skill set than Haynes King, so I'm hoping that he's just not going to run him into the ground. But we'll see. Yeah. Because more so than the management of Haynes King, I didn't love the management of Jamal Haynes, of what Buster Faulkner did. That bothered me more than him running Haynes King into the ground. So I am in wait and see mode with Buster Faulkner, but I definitely don't hate it, especially because you're bringing in somebody that can help, that like knows the offense essentially.
I thought he was better in 24 than he was in 25.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep. And that, I hope you're getting that version of it if you're a Florida fan. Trying to think of who are some other new coaches, Trev? Who are some teams that
I'm pretty sure Kentucky and Will Stein hired the LSU offensive coordinator that was like co-offensive coordinator with Mike Denbrock at LSU in 23.
You talking about the quarterback's coach? Was it
like Sloan or whatever?
Yeah. I mean, look, if you're Will Stein, my hope is that he's still running the offense, and then let Joe Sloan do what he did, the year before, which is coordinate but not call. I think Joe Sloan is a good football mind. I don't think he got to where he got to without being a good football mind. I think the problem is not everybody that's a good football mind is a good play caller. The problem for Will Stein is he made one of the worst coordinator hires as well. He hired Jay Bateman as his defensive coordinator, and that's
rough.
Not going to go well. Just not going to go well. Looking through some of the other teams that hired new coaches. So who are the new coaches in the ACC? If I remember correctly, I thought Stanford had who did Coach Pritchard hire? Let me see here real quick. I know they recently made they've made some assistant coach hires, but I don't remember who they hired as their coordinators. I know there was some talk about like Chris. I think I saw something like Chris Richard was being talked about. They hired Terry Heffernan as their offensive coordinator. He was the offensive line coach and run game coordinator. I wonder if him being the offensive coordinator, it means that Coach Pritchard's going to call plays. Tavita's going to call plays. I wonder if that's going to be the case. We'll see. I mean, it would make sense. He came from a background where his head coach that he worked for called plays. David Shaw called plays for a long time. So yeah, that's what I'm very curious about of the new coaches. I'm just trying to look through here of other new coaches. Trev, anybody else that's interesting? I don't know who K-State hired. I'm not sure who they hired. I'd have to go through some of these. Gary Patterson. Here's not a new coach, but what are your thoughts on Gary Patterson being the new defensive coordinator? It's not. I don't think it's final yet, but it looks like that's where it's going. Gary Patterson being the new defensive coordinator at USC. I think that is we missed on the guys we wanted, and we're gonna go for a name and a guy that I'm familiar with who used to be able to put defenses on the field.
Yeah, I definitely think it was more of a panic hire. I don't love guys that go from being head coaches to coordinators at the collegiate level. I don't think that there's ever really a whole lot of success in that. You have your outliers, Chip Kelly, but I mean, there was a break in between then, from when he was a head coach at the college level to, took a year off. Then he became the offensive coordinator with Ohio State, and he was a one and done. I don't love it. I think it was a reach. I think it was definitely more of a panic hire than a sought out decision, in my opinion.
Yeah. I forgot about this one. Matt Campbell hired Danton Lynn as his defensive coordinator, which I think is a strong hire, very strong hire. And Andy Kotelnicki going back to Kansas is going to be good for Kansas. Him and Lance Leopold worked well together. He wasn't as good when he didn't have somebody kind of
right
reining him in. I thought that was good. So it's like, so I say grass isn't always greener. Grass isn't always greener. So I'm very curious to how that's going to turn out. But yeah. I do like the Danton Lynn hire at Penn State as their D coordinator. I like him as a coordinator. I definitely think he'll be better getting away from Lincoln Riley, which we've talked about a lot.
Agreed.
So, all right, last couple here before we get out of here. Here we go.
From Sine, Cosine, and Tangent, have you ever seen a crazier start than the Syracuse game?
No. I've learned never seen a game where you get 21 points before your offense is on the field. I've never seen anything like that.
No, I mean
2 pick sixes and a blocked punt for a touchdown. No, I've never seen it like that.
No, never ever. The only thing that compares, and it's not a crazy start for one team, it's just the game and how it started, was also against Syracuse. Like the 2016 Syracuse game was also crazy. But no, I've never seen a start like that. From Robert Bishop, do you think they mostly only played 2 running backs this year because of the star power of Jadarian Price and Love? And do you think with them gone, will we see a 3 or 4 back rotation?
Well, I'd like to think so, but I mean, Jaywan Sider said when he was hired, he only likes to play 2 running backs. And he's been pretty open and honest about that. So if they're going to play more than 2 running backs, I got to think it's going to be more so like Mike Denbrock saying, hey, we need to find roles for this guy, this guy, this guy. Unless Coach Sider's like, look, last year my philosophy was perfect for last year because we had these 2 studs. Maybe he over the offseasons looks at his roster and says, hey, maybe there's more merit to now playing 3 or playing 4 or having guys in certain roles. Maybe he views there as being more merit now. I mean, it could be Mike Denbrock doesn't have to make him because he now sees value in it because there's not a clear 1 and 2 now. So I've got to find it. It's easy to have a desire to have a clear 1 and 2, Trev, when your clear 1 and 2 the last few years has been Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price. And then before that, it was Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. It's like, well, who else are you going to play, with all due respect? And so I hope that he's able to do that. And he didn't get the best version of, I mean, I'll say this. The reason I'm somewhat hopeful he'll change is because I do think they were pushing Kedron Young before he got hurt. They were pushing for a role for Kedron Young. He was going to have a role on his football team before he got hurt. You could see it in the spring and you could see it early in fall camp.
Yeah, it's more so it's what you said, and I've said it before in shows too. Like he has never been in a situation where he's had to go past the top 2. He just hasn't. And right now you're going into an offseason where, as things stand right now, you don't have 2 clear-cut guys head and shoulders above everybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hoping so. So I guess if this were a buy, sell, hold, I would hope buy it, because I think this year you're going to need to.
Yep. Agree.
Another one from Robert Bishop. Do you think Dante Moore should have entered the draft since he'd be the second quarterback taken rather than entering next year where it looks to be a deeper quarterback class?
No, because of why I don't think he entered. I don't think Dante Moore is physically ready to play. I don't think Dante Moore is mentally ready to play in the NFL, and I don't think his game is to the point where he could step in and thrive. The reality is in today's NFL, when you draft a rookie in the top 5 to 10, you're expecting that guy to start now. If not game 1, at some point in time that year. You don't normally pick in the top 10 when you have an established veteran quarterback. This doesn't happen very often. Occasionally it does, but it doesn't happen often. It's why Anthony Richardson was rushed onto the field. It's why Kyle Wilson was rushed onto the field. It's why Trey Lance was rushed on the field. It's like you are. And then some guys handle it well. Drake May crushed it. Jaden Daniels crushed it. I mean, Jaden Daniels, until he got injured, I mean, just looking at the stats, was playing pretty well before he got injured. And then Washington seemed to have a bunch of injuries this year, Trev, around him as well. So, I look at it and say, yeah, I understand you're going to be picked higher. You're going to make a lot of money. Maybe you lose some dollars, but I would argue that Dante's going to make enough money this year in NIL to have millions of dollars for the rest of his life. He'll be 21 years old and have made millions of dollars, as long as you're smart about what you do with it. But more importantly, his game and his body and his mind and his maturity will be greater to where he's able to thrive. He's only 20 years old. He's young. I think he needs that development because I'm of the belief that it's better to go to the NFL prepared to succeed than it is to go simply to speed up your clock, be in a better draft class. And when I say speed up your clock, getting closer to your second contract, because if you're not ready, you may not get to your second contract and be as good of a player as you should have been. I'll let you a little on insight. That was a big reason Xavier Watts decided to come back in 2024. Is he had some people around him saying, hey, I think you should go. And he said, I don't know that I'm ready to thrive in the NFL right now. And this is the kind of kid Xavier Watts is. He was talking through like, yes, I'll get to my second contract faster, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. but I still think my game's not ready yet. And when I get to the NFL, I want to be ready to thrive. And I'm going to tell you right now, Xavier Watts was a way better player as a rookie in 2025 than he would have been in 2024. His game grew, and we talked about this, Trev. He was a better player in 2024 than he was in 2023. And he was more ready. So now he's up for, I've seen some things where he might be up for, rookie of the year, defensive rookie of the year. I've seen a couple things like that. He led all rookies in safeties. I mean, in interceptions, I should say. I think it was huge for him to get that extra year, but he understood I'm not ready yet. And I think Dante and his people around him, hopefully this is why they didn't do it, understand that, like, yeah, you're not ready yet. Because at the end of the day, Trev, if Dante's the quarterback next year that we both believe he can be, I don't care who's in next year's draft class. He's still going to be a top 5 pick. And he's still going to make a lot of money. And he's going to be more ready to then thrive once he gets there. That's what I believe. And that's why I do think Dante made the right decision. I do. Taking money, short-term money, is not always the best thing. Sometimes it's worth taking the risk and betting on yourself, knowing that I'm going to make more money down the road because I'm going to be more prepared to thrive. And then when I get to my second contract, I'm a 2 or 3 time Pro Bowler, as opposed to a guy who's just finally figuring out how to be a good quarterback. I'm going to have a much better second contract in that situation. And if something happens, he's going to have insurance. They still have those insurance policies. And B, because of NIL, like, did you see the number of early entrants in the NFL draft? Way down. It was like 40 something, way down, because more kids can say, hey, I can, that poor kid who came from nothing, who in the past would leave after his junior year because he had to go take care of his mom, can now say, I am taking care of my mom. I've been doing that the last 3 years with my NIL. She's good. I've already bought her a house with this NIL contract I got from Miami, or Notre Dame or Ohio State or whatever. And you can say, now it's about doing what's best for me. And what's best for me is my game isn't ready yet. Yeah, I might be picked 25th, but if I come back next year, I might be picked 10th. But I'm still going to make $1.5 million this year in NIL deals and other stuff to stay. And now my game is more ready to thrive. And that's where I think, in that regard, NIL has been good for college football in that regard. I don't know if Dante Moore would have stayed if this was the pre-NIL era. Because now you're talking about, dude, you're going to school for free. Okay, yeah, they gave you $50,000 under the table to get you there. Like, just, that's not life-changing money, Trev. Half of that's going to the government if you even report it. Your dad's going to take some. This guy's going to take some. You're going to spend it on this. That's not life-changing money. I mean, it's nothing to sniff at, but that's not like I'm set for life because I got $50,000 under the table to go to Oregon. Like, you're going to the NFL because you can't turn down tens of millions of dollars when you're making nothing. Now it's like, dude, I'm making good money. I can stay and develop as a young man, develop as a quarterback. I think that was the smart decision for Dante. I think he did the right thing. It's what I would have advised him to do, and I'm glad he did it because it's good for him and it's good for the game. Getting a second full year of Dante Moore as a starter is going to be good for the game, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's definitely a double-edged sword. I mean, I don't want to paint myself as an NFL draft analyst. I agree with everything that you said, and I think that his game could absolutely do it. The flip side of that conversation, though, is now his game's going to get picked apart. I mean, you got a guy. What if you get hurt? Drew Aller's draft stock would have been significantly higher if he left after the 2024 season opposed to now. So like there's always give and take. I think Dante Moore is going to thrive. That's me personally. But I also, if he gets hurt, hindsight will always be 2020.
But Drew Aller's still a millionaire.
Yeah.
That's my thing. Right. But you're spot on. Drew Aller cost himself. He's still a millionaire, but he cost himself tens of millions of dollars potentially by not going out earlier. You're absolutely right.
And so and not every situation is created equal. To your point, if Dante Moore is who we think that he's going to be, he's most likely still going to be a top 5 pick. Now, the other thing that we've also noticed from NFL GMs is they also really love the shiny new toy. I didn't think Lamar Jackson was going to be taken as the last pick in the first round either. They're different players, but you just never know. But odds are, as long as you set yourself up for more success down the road, which is what this move is doing, it's also more about getting to the second contract, which is going to be huge for him. So I think it was the right move, and one that was, I'm hoping, took a lot of time and thought, because there is that risk of what if you do get hurt? Now it's your game is going to get picked apart. You were being projected as the number 2 overall pick with your game still needing development. And so now it's, well, what if you don't take those necessary strides in development? Your game's going to continue to get picked apart. But again, that's why he came back, is to improve those areas. So I think it was the right move.
Really, there's not many things, Trev, worth great value that don't come with some risk. I mean,
Sure.
everything comes with some risk. You have to just sometimes be willing to bet on yourself. And that's what Dante's doing. That's what Drew Aller did, and it didn't work out for him, unfortunately. I still don't think Drew Aller would have been picked as high as people think he would have. I think the NFL, I don't think he would have been drafted as high in last year's draft as people think he would have been. I could be wrong, but he had a lot of bad tape. And some good tape too.
He would have been one of those players that people would have just fell in love with him because of his measurables and what he would have done at the combine and the pro day.
Yeah.
That's yeah.
The NFL's terrible at drafting quarterbacks. It really is. I just have a feeling his game would have got picked apart a lot by coaches. We'll see. This is the last one, Trev.
From Chief Brody, sorry for the late entry. Do you take the 2019 running back room or the 2026 running back room?
2026.
Yeah.
The depth is way better. I mean, in 2019, you had Tony Jones Jr., who had played a lot of football. Tony was a good football player. And then you had a true freshman in Kyron Williams. You had Sebo Flemister. And you had Jameer Smith, Jafar Armstrong. Those were your running backs. This running back room is exponentially better than that running back room. And that's not even about Tony Jones Jr. He was a good running back, averaged 5.9 yards per carry. I'd be thrilled if Aeneas Williams averaged, or Keedron, whoever's starters, averages 5.9 yards per carry. And the thing that's a bummer about Tony is, had he not got hurt in 2019 and missed a couple games, he was on the verge of going off.
Yeah.
I mean, we forget he had 131 against Virginia, 102 against Bowling Green on only 7 carries, and he had a 176-yard performance, 7 yards a carry against USC. In those 3 games, Trev, this is a crazy stat that Tony was, how hot he was going into that game. He had rushed for in the 3 games before the Michigan game, and he got hurt against Michigan. In the 3 games before that, he had rushed for 409 yards on 40 carries against Virginia, Bowling Green, and USC. They had played 6 games that point in the season, and he'd already rushed for 100 yards 4 times. And then he got hurt, and he was not the same player the last 4 games. He had 2 yards carry against Duke, 2.9 against Navy, 4.1 against BC, 3.6 against Stanford. And then he went off in the bowl game when he was healthy again. He rested up and he went for 135 yards on 11 carries. Had like an 84-yard touchdown run in that game against Iowa State. He was really good that year before he got hurt. But after that, you had a freshman in Kyron Williams who was a nice player, but I don't think he was ready to be like what Keedron or Nolan James could be, because he was a freshman and they're sophomore and junior. And with all due respect to Sebo Flemister and Jameer Smith, they are not in the same universe of players as what Nolan James Jr. and Javian Osborne and Jonas Walton are. So it's not even close. Not even close.
Agreed completely.
And look, those are 2 NFL running backs at the top of that board, Trev. I mean, Tony Jones Jr. has played in the NFL, and so has, obviously, Kyron's a Pro Bowler. So I think that tells you a little bit about, and I think you could debate the top 2 based on what we know about those guys and what we know about the top 2 now. But it's no debate 3 to 5. And the question was the room as a whole. It's not even like Jafar Armstrong, Sebo Flemister, and Jameer Smith, or Nolan James Jr., Javian Osborne, and Jonas Walton.
Yeah, it's no contest. Agreed.
Yeah. No, yeah, and Mr. John agrees with us. So
there we go.
That'll do it, Trev.
Well, folks, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Here in about 50 minutes or so, IB Nation Sports Beat's going live. One of the topics that they're covering is the On3 Top 100. So if you haven't gotten enough of that yet, be sure to tune in this evening, 5:05, they go live. On your way out of here, be sure to hit that like, hit that subscribe, hit that notification bell, share this podcast with your friends and family, anybody that you know loves Notre Dame and college football as much as you do. But as always, now that it's the offseason, the best way to support and stay in tune with what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We'll be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. for the Friday free-for-all mailbag. So get your questions ready and bring it, because we're getting ready for another fun show tomorrow. Have a wonderful and safe evening. For Brian, I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.